As Prince Derrin said about his own brother Aerion Targaryen, a pity he wasn't born a Fossoway. Then he'd think himself an apple, and we'd all be a deal safer. But there you are. We've also been told that dragons don't plant trees, but House Fossoway does. It's an interesting contrast, isn't it? The symbolism of something that's around forever and represents life and fertility versus something that's just absolutely bent on destruction and kills itself whenever it fights another of its kind. And yeah, it's a very different vibe there, isn't it? Now, they've also been playing with colors for much longer, House Fossoway. Well before the dragons came along. Yeah, red dragons, green dragons, brown dragons. Apples have that variety as well. And though I haven't eaten any dragons, it's a meal for kings, and I'm more of a common man. I suspect I'd prefer apples if I did have the opportunity to do some sort of taste test. And yes, apples are loaded with symbolism on their own, even without dragons in the picture. They're also loaded with fiber, by the way. And George R. Martin doesn't just love food, he loves wordplay. So you get both of them here. You get a house just as old as any, with ties to the ancient, possibly supernatural, mythological founders of the Reach, and all the things that come along with that. The real first men, the first men. But of course, the Fossoways, like so many other houses, made the transition to Andal, to the Seven, to knighthood. And it seems they took to it well, like much of the Reach. They're big fans of all these things. Like always, it's the characters that matter the most, however. All the rest is just set up to make the characters more interesting, to have them something to exist in, to be a part of. And the apples do fall far from the tree, meaning there's a wide variety here, right? They're not all just carbon copies of each other, a bunch of very similar characters. Just comparing Stefan to Raymun says a lot. And while we don't have an example of a better Fossoway than Raymun, I almost said bitter, we do have a candidate or two for someone worse than Stefan, so that's something. But sticking with the wordplay, bad apples don't ruin the bunch. Especially not in this case. They actually make for a better story. They enhance the bunch, yeah. From the noblest deeds to the worst puns, from apple lore to a son of Garth Greenhand, plus theories to fill in all the gaps. All that and more, plus a taste of glory on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of History of Westeros podcast coming at you on Easter Sunday, as it turns out, here at 3 o'clock, our usual time slot on Sundays. Grab an apple and enjoy as we take you through the full history of House Fossoway, talking about characters and everything else. Now, I actually ate a lot of apples while I'm writing this episode. Yeah, I mean, it's... Every time I was writing something, I'd be like, apples, yeah, that sounds really good. And I would just go grab an apple and eat it while I was writing this. Green apples, mind you. I didn't eat a red apple while writing this episode, but I ate several Granny Smiths. Darn right. Anyway, we are here, like I said, every 3 o'clock on Sunday. Well, most 3 o'clocks on Sunday. And we are everywhere you can find us. Podcast, that is, with on podcast platforms and ad-free if you look on Patreon. And if you catch us on Spotify, the video version is edited a week after we're live on YouTube. So the best, cleanest version of this is up on Spotify. All right. Thanks to Nina. She had a lot of great notes, as she so often does when we're doing house histories or deep dives on characters or something in between. Over on goodqueenalley.tumblr.com, you can find a post about Maekar and how things would have gone in that family if Maekar had been a woman. Like, would he have married, or she, in this case, have married Baelor, or was Derrin just so against the incest marriages? What would we think would happen? It's a good what-if type question from a family that was, that generation was all male. This is the first episode of Topics Moot 2026. Patreon voters picked this one. 11 more are coming. As of right now, only 3 are left to be chosen. We've got the last 3 currently being voted on, so we'll have a full list for y'all pretty soon as to what was chosen. House Fossoway, unless that changes, was the biggest single vote getter out of all the topics. So this one was very wanted, and we're very happy to deliver it. You can hit us up with questions about this or about Topics Moot or about anything at westeroshistory@gmail.com or on any of our socials. We're pretty much everywhere. Start off with a trivia question, and of course it's very related to the topic, not directly related to House Fossoway in this case, but apples. Who mentioned an apple while on their deathbed? Somewhat prominently mentioned an apple on their deathbed. Narrows it down a bit. Not that many characters have deathbed scenes, but there's a few. Answer at the end and answer during the episode. If you're paying close attention, you'll hear it get delivered under the radar here. Let's talk real quickly about what's in store for today. Apples, obviously. They're in lots of stores, in fact. But here we have a persistent presence throughout history in this house. They are an old house. Like I said, they're first men, then Andal, and then they're still around now. So just everything. They've been around for all the major events. We always have detail on how they participated, but it's a very large, long, rich history. It's a ubiquitous food, right? Which means it appears often enough outside of the context of House Fossoway. Just George likes describing food, and apples are, well, they're dessert food, they're breakfast food, they're snack food, they're alcohol. I mean, they're food for common folk.
They're used in savory dishes too.
Yeah, they're just really, really are ubiquitous in just our existence. They're dessert. They're, like I say, Shea said, savory dishes, and they're food for horses. That's food for rich people and food for animals. Like, there's just not a lot of examples like that. It's arguably a top 5 human food stuff of all time. I don't know how you would rate that, go about deciding that, but I'm going to make the case anyway. We'll have a little bit of apple facts and apple symbolism a little later in the episode. And more than 5 minutes on the Westerosi aspects there. Starting off, I'll give you the list of topics that are coming here. We have First Mention, as we so often do. First Men era. Foss the Archer, who is the progenitor of House Fossoway. Cider Hall, the Red Apple Fossoway's castle. Then the coming of the Andals, some tidbits there. The Targaryen era to follow, Field of Fire, the Old King's Apple Counter, the Reds stay green, the Reds stay red, from Apple Lords to Apple Knights, Ashford Meadow, the Reds turn green, the Bad Apple, a fruity diversion. Then the apples of A Song of Ice and Fire. Maybe say A Song of Ice, Apple, Fire? Yeah, Ice, Apple, and Fire. The 3 things that matter most. Lady Leonette, who is a Fossoway. Green Sir John Fossoway. Some red apple Fossoways. Lothor Apple Eater. And we'll close off with the brown apple. Ooh, I think a lot of you know who I'm talking about there. That's Franklin Flowers, who is a Fossoway bastard in the Golden Company. And a captain at that, so an important guy. All right, let's get to it. And now that we have those first mentions in the way here, let's get to it. First mention, they don't actually appear in a Game of Thrones in the main text, but they do appear in the appendix. We learn in the appendix of Game of Thrones that Mace Tyrell's sister, Janna, is married to Sir John Fossoway, who is probably the head of the house, but they're a knightly house these days. They used to be lordly. We'll get into that detail too. So Sir John could just be a knight of the house, but he might be the head. That makes it a little confusing. Not to mention there's Fossoways here and there. We're not always sure who's green and who's red, but either way, they're all sworn to House Tyrell, and they're both reach houses, of course. So that works together as well as serving to make them sort of a whole. They're mentioned again in a Jon chapter in A Clash of Kings when Lord Commander Mormont sends a certain Sir Arnell to Renly as an envoy. And this Sir Arnell, whose last name isn't mentioned, so he's probably a bastard because it says his mother was a Green Apple Fossoway. Like, yeah, I mean, maybe Sir Arnell with some noble last name with his father's house, but I have a feeling that's not what we're seeing here. Either way, sadly, we never hear again of Sir Arnell. He's sent to Renly as an envoy, and yeah, that's the last we hear of Sir Arnell. He may have gone rogue, may have been killed. I mean, he probably never even got to Renly. Renly's probably dead before he got there. Either way, here's the actual first appearance of a Fossoway. Quote,
Sir Wendell Manderly, Lucas Blackwood, Sir Perwyn Frey, and the rest of her high-born companions accompanied her to the castle. The great hall of Lord Caswell's keep was great only by courtesy. Yet room was found on the crowded benches for Catelyn's men, amidst Renly's own knights. Catelyn was assigned a place on the dais between red-faced Lord Mathis Rowan and genial Ser John Fossoway of the Green Apple Fossoways. Ser John made jests, while Lord Mathis inquired politely after the health of her father, brother, and children.
Maybe a little wordplay with George there, having red-faced Mathis and Ser John of the Green and red right away. It'd be funny if it turned out that Mathis Rowan's mother was a Fossoway also, or something like that, especially a red apple Fossoway. And right away, when we first meet Raymun Fossoway and Stefan Fossoway, there's a bunch of puns. I'm sure y'all remember that. We'll be getting to it in good time. And here we have Ser John, the first Fossoway meet. He's a jokester. I think this is just a theme with the house. George has included a lot of humor with these guys, not just wordplay, but things like this, just having them be of that sort.
I think if you grow up with your sigil being an apple, you have to know how to take a joke. Or you're just going to be miserable for your whole life, yes. Right? Like, everyone's going to make fun of you if you don't make fun of yourself first.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's a Tyrion thing. You got to lean into the joke before they do. Yeah, you got to make it your own. That's a great point. Yeah. And I think that's not just random, though. It's not just about the apple sigil. ASOIAF makes a good point here. But as we get into it, Cider Hall, it's really well located. It looks like a place that has probably, as far as the Reach goes, mostly avoided war. It's not in the path of where a lot of armies would be. It's not a big target. Kind of like how the Arbor gets left alone a bit, because no one wants to screw up the wine supply. Like, leave the cider guys alone. Let them make their cider, unless they're a big problem. So honestly, I think it's kind of an idyllic place to grow up. We'll get into more detail later, but growing up in a really nice place where you don't have a lot to worry about, yeah, that might make you be more likely to grow up a little bit of a jokester. Just, you're a little more at ease. Who knows? So, score one for the Green Apples, too. They appeared before the Red Apple Fossoways. Hey! Now, it's also notable that the Fossoways, like I said, are knightly here. Ser John Fossoway, but they still, it seems like they're treated still like they're at the top of the nobility in the Reach, minus the Tyrells. And that has to do with events we'll get to. It seems like perhaps they were demoted. And while we don't have all the details of that, we will talk about it. It seems like a lot of the rest of the Reach kind of ignore that. It's like, yeah, we all descend from the descendants of Garth Greenhand here. We're all about the same. Yeah. Anyway, the marriage alliances seem to reflect that. No one seems to treat them like they're lesser, even though, like, kind of technically they might be. Anyway, if Renly had become king, an ideal situation for the Fossoways would be two of them in the Rainbow Guard, one the red and one the green. Of course, knowing George would probably flip it, like this, the Green Apple Fossoway would be the red, and the red one would be the green. Yep. First Men era. The Reach's fame for fertility and produce is ancient. It's been that way for a long time. Everybody knows it. It's well established, blah, blah, blah. Many of the old stories are about the origin of it all, meaning how it became so fertile in the first place. Some of it's just, of course, natural. It came out that way. Garth Greenhand, of course, is given a lot of credit too. He's the major founding myth, supposedly taught farming to the Reach, and or he led his people to the Reach from Essos, got them all set up there, taught them how to work the land and make the most out of it, and they sure did make the most out of it. Many of his various children were associated with different crops or foods or ways of getting those foods. Like you might have one, like the House Dairy, where they're not in the Reach, but a good example, they have a plowman, right? That's farming. You have Foss the Archer is the character that's founder here. It's a little unusual. We have an archer character, not some sort of apple planter guy. But Garth Greenhand kind of already took that role. He's like the Johnny Appleseed of Westeros, but blown to much bigger proportions because he was doing not just apple spreading, but like all the foods, but apples included. All the like prominent ancient food stuffs, right? That's kind of where Garth Greenhand's descendants took things. And this is one of the most prominent ones because, well, apples are also a really big deal in the real world. George was borrowing from a lot of that, and hence the influence of the Johnny Appleseed type character. So some of Garth's children, and himself included, are mythologized, given supernatural powers. Perhaps that's just exaggeration, given time past. These people did such important things that they're raised up This is a common thing we've seen, not just here, but in the real world. But here, we can't just, of course, eliminate the possibility that it was supernatural. It might have been supernatural stuff. Maybe it's just the stories that were told, but could be both. Some of his descendants aren't absolutely notably supernatural, like they descend from a supernatural person, but they don't actually do supernatural things. They're just really good at stuff. Right? They're just like really excellent in what they do. Foss the Archer might be a example of that. Let's talk about him specifically. So he's a first generation descendant of Garth Greenhand, a rather large number of descendants. I guess when you have that many brothers and sisters like Foss the Archer did, maybe you're more likely to specialize in things, or maybe you got to really find your place. There's so many different people, so many people doing different things, so many people good at different things. Well, you got to stand out somehow. This guy, he's known for shooting the heads off of women he liked. I don't know why that's...
shooting the heads off, shooting the
apples off of. Geez, that is really dark, isn't it?
Yeah, that was really dark.
Shooting the heads off of women he liked.
I don't think he was.
What's funny is
say that again.
Known to shoot apples off the heads of women he liked. We have art here by Michael Clarfeld. Of course, it's Michael Clarfeld art. Not always, but no one's surprised that we have Michael Clarfeld art here. It's on the map. Here is our friend Mo cosplaying as Foss the Archer. Now, if this is what he did to women he liked, shooting apples off their heads, what did he do to women he disliked? Because this is a weird way of flirting. This is really weird. But it's also meant to be like symbolic, right? This is his exploits or some sort of extension of his famously fertile father. So this is also a dude who hung out with lots of women, and the implication being that some of them had his children, and, these early days, so many people descend from these characters. So if you have a father doing this kind of thing, like from a very realistic perspective, a real world perspective, if you grow up with a father who's sleeping around a lot, well, you might do that too. Or you might push back against it, but and never do it like a Jon Snow. But Foss is more of the former category, it seems. It's probably a euphemism, or could be a euphemism, shooting apples off the heads. This could be some sort of euphemism for getting them pregnant. I mean, Cupid's arrow, William Tell. There's a lot of other stories that are going on here that are being borrowed from, and the vibe is there for that. Need to suggest maybe he was worshipped as a minor deity. A lot of these ancient figures were. That's a real world thing too. People that get so famous in their own time, they establish such important traditions or kingdoms or what have you. They figure out the importance of apples. They're the first guy to brew cider or something like that. You'd be remembered for that. Even in prehistoric times, that's the kind of thing that people would just latch onto and tell their children about, and so forth. But it is kind of weird, right? And that's why you look for euphemisms and symbolism in this story, because all these apples, this bounty, this fertility, and he just wants to shoot at it with his arrows? Like, something's wrong with that, right? Aren't there better uses for bows than that? Like, why would I go hunting when I have all these apples to shoot at? That's crazy, right? Like, the food that runs away seems like the one you need to shoot at. The apples are just there, man. You don't have to shoot them. It literally falls on the ground eventually if you just leave it be. Arrows seem like overkill. But that might be part of the point. Things were so fertile. Nina suggests the Age of Heroes was such a different time that people have the ability, the time, the extra resources to waste on things that make them look like demigods. This might be how he established his reputation, by spending his time doing demigod things, and that convinced people he was one.
There's a children's movie, a classic movie a lot of people listening might think of, called The Swan Princess, where one of the, in the first half, the prince is kind of a real jerk, who kind of a Jamie type character, really show offish, and he's shooting arrows off the head of his bumbling sidekick. And so it's kind of a boorish thing, but also show offy. He is look at my prowess type of thing. So I think it is maybe a little tropey. I'm sure there's other examples of men showing off their prowess by doing these very dangerous things. And
you could probably get away with making mistakes and not having people find out, like the occasional one like that. If some of you may remember the movie The Quick and the Dead, it was a kind of a silly gunslinger movie, but they did get serious with the character that was like a trick shot artist, and he would like shoot cards like right through the center of the ace of spades or whatever. And this one, I think it was Sharon Stone's character, or maybe it was I don't know, it doesn't matter, who accused him, was like, hey, I know, I've heard of you. What happened in that names of town is like, you don't always hit, do you? It's like acting like this dude shot a kid or something like that. Yeah, well, if you're Foss the Archer, maybe that happened once or twice too, but you have the power, the wealth to make that rumor go away, or to, somehow make people not talk about it. Maybe using very dark means. Anyway, I mean, presumably one of these women he liked, that he shot arrows at, the apples off their heads, became the first lady of House Fossoway. I suppose he retired from his days of shooting at fruit to raise a family that turned out to be quite famous and successful. I'm guessing, given his vibe, that this First Lady Fossoway had more to do with the raising of the children. I mean, that's often how it goes. This guy just seems like a weirdo shooting at apples all the time. But anyway, obviously I'm being a little silly here, but in the ancient times of the Reach and First Men days, marriage, the Seven, it wasn't like that. You could have a guy that married or impregnated lots of women, and that would have been okay in First Men times. I mean, okay meaning somewhat, if not maybe entirely, socially acceptable. It's not against their religion, I guess, is the point I'm making, because that religion didn't exist then. There wasn't as big of a emphasis, if any, on monogamy in those times. So we don't have to assume that Foss chose one woman in particular to settle down with, but there may have been a whole bunch of women, and the children of those women as a whole, the strongest of those perhaps ran with it and became the first lords of House Fossoway, of Cider Hall. Foss's legendary half-sister, Florys, is supposed to be the simultaneous ancestress, cool name, cool word, houses Ball, Peak, and Florent, and maybe even the Lannisters. So there's a lot of connection here, and this is part of why these houses, even with Fossoways getting demoted to knightly, they still can consider themselves largely equal. Foss's half-brothers, he had half-brothers, Harlan and Herndon, had a polyandrous marriage with a Woods Witch. That's explicit. It's not like between the lines. No, they both had this Woods Witch as a lover. Centuries later, Lyman Hightower had polygamous marriages. He only gave it up at the coming of the Andals. So there was a lot of this going on. It wasn't just the occasional thing. It was pretty normal at the time. And of course, very, very, very long ago. So maybe there was never an official wife for Foss the Archer. It may have just been something that developed over time. There's a consolidation of Fossoway power. These as the culture shifted and populations grew, these things became more delineated. But the bottom line, however it got that way, the wealth of Cider Hall is held by armed force. They are a noble house, a knightly house. Same difference in this case, meaning that, yeah, they're a house with a product, with produce that makes them money, which is not super typical. In fact, a lot of noble houses look down on that. They look down on merchant business, which probably just means that the Fossoways have a gap, like they have some space between themselves and the running of the business. They have subordinates, stewards. Maybe they have an equivalent of House Cassell, a house that's been tied to them for a long time as the stewards of that house. Or as a recurring role subordinate to the main house. Something like that. There could be some smaller house. There's a house called Appleton in the Reach. We have really no idea where they exist or where their castle is. But that could be, for example, that's the kind of name you might expect for a Fossoway steward house, right? Someone that runs the business, that does the day-to-day operations, while the Fossoways themselves do what? Practice fighting, running armies, jousting, playing with swords, like doing the things that keeps everybody else in line. In case something goes wrong, well, they can fight for their lands to hold them and let the stewards continue making them big money. And that's important, though. I think you consider the Arbor, they're rich, and it's not hard to see why. They've got wine, they've got shipping, and they own the shipping. well, the shipping is different from Cider Hall. It's inland, very inland. They are on the river, actually 2 rivers, so there's some shipping downriver, but we're not talking sailing halfway around Westeros to deliver their goods. They probably have to outsource that. Still, this is a house that's had a product that is widely used frequently. So that implies a steady, if not substantial income for a very, very, very long time. So you can kind of understand why, even though mercantilism is frowned on by the nobility, it's pretty big for houses like the Fossoways and the Arbor and a few others. And particularly houses of the Reach are where that exception is found, where you have a bit more of the mercantilism married to the house vibe. The other big heart of Andal nobility and culture is, of course, the Vale, and you don't have as much of this there, where they're like, yeah, we like apples, or we like golden roses, or grapes, for example. Yeah, the Vale symbolism is more martial, more religious, or both. Now, let's talk about Cider Hall itself. Like many castles, it probably had an early version that was expanded on. In this case, it's easy to see how they expanded on it because we just got through talking about their steady income. So they, like the Freys, for example, started off with a bridge on either side, or a wooden fort on either side that gradually became stone fort, stone bridge, this and that, big tower house, just added to over the centuries. Now that's only 600 years old. Cider Hall's had way longer for that. They're also not in a place that's as contested. The Freys, people, they know people would want to pay to get across the river. Cider Hall, people are coming there to drink the cider or to get the apples or to do business, right? It's not to go from one place to the other. It's not a transition point necessarily. Although they do have a lot of traffic coming back and forth because they are in an extremely strategic place. More strategic perhaps for money making than for military things, but both. It is, my guess would be that they built their first fort out of apple trees, the wood from apple trees that had been developed in the area. Maybe the seeds and root stocks had been brought over from Essos, or maybe they were already there. Maybe this was a place where apples had been growing naturally, and people said, boom, look at this spot. Let's build a castle here. It's got apples. It's got fertile ground around it, which is implied by the apples. And from a geographical standpoint, it's right on. Ashea is going to put the map up if she doesn't already have it up. At the confluence of the Cockles-Went and the Mander. So it's right there on the 2 rivers. So it's got rivers on 2 sides of it, which is very defensible. So they don't really have to worry as much about being attacked from the west or the south. And there's a lot of traffic because the Mander is the main river of the Reach. A lot of traffic, boats, and people going upriver, like alongside it, to using it as a way to find their way. You know, just follow the river, whether you're on it or not. You would be passing by Cider Hall if you go about halfway up or halfway down. It's very central in the Reach, which is also really important to what I was saying earlier about it being kind of idyllic. It's very defensible. And perhaps even commanding, right? This helps explain why it's so ancient. It wouldn't take long to figure out the value of this. But even Foss the Archer, who maybe was only interested in shooting at apples, could see, wow, look at all the apples for me to shoot at. Just upriver, the Mander is Bitterbridge. And before that, though, before you get to Bitterbridge, there's a smaller tributary that features Longtable right at the end. So you've got a lot of pretty well-known Reach castles along this stretch here. Downriver from Cider Hall, not very far, once again on the Mander, is actual Highgarden. I'm not sure the travel distance, but it might be just a couple of days by boat to get from Highgarden to Cider Hall. It might be faster, which means that Highgarden has fresh cider and apples all the time because they get it right from Cider Hall by boat very quickly downriver. Don't even have to like row, just catch some wind or just catch the drift, literally. Heck, who needs boats? Just throw the apples into the water and some dudes can sit there with nets down at the Mander catching apples. They float, right? Why waste good boats on that? Just catch them in the nets. So that's pretty cool for them. They're really locked in. They don't have to worry about defense as much, but they probably have plenty of money to spend on it, you know, in case they do. So think about this. I said it's deep into the Reach. It's not close to any borders. It's not close to the west, and there's a river in the way. It's not close to the Riverlands, and there's a river in the way there, too. It's not close to the Dornish Marches, and there's a river in the way. And it is closest to the Stormlands out of everything, but not that close. And there's no river in the way. So of all the ancient wars they would have fought, and we're, for now, discounting wars they would have fought against other houses in the Reach. Once the Reach was a thing, a contiguous polity, a region, there was kings of the Reach and all that, and kings of the Stormlands. That's where a lot of their warring would have been, because that's the closest contested border. That's the one enemy that doesn't have to cross a river to get to them. They can just march straight west, and they'll get to Cider Hall. Just march along the Cockles Went, and you get there. Now, what they would pass on the way, if they're marching along the Cockles Went, is Ashford Meadow. This is something that I neglected to point out during any of our Dunk and Egg coverage, I don't think. Maybe we did. It's been so long. Maybe we talked about it years ago. But it's really close. Cider Hall is probably the most major castle near to Ashford. The first one you'd get to, especially if you're going downriver on the Cockles Went, which again, be a very easy way to travel downriver, no sailing, just let the river take you. So again, this paints a picture of a place that's very nice to live. You probably are less likely to have your lands despoiled. Your lord might be a jerk from time to time, but he's not gonna be a jerk because he's broke probably and is trying to extra tax you. It can still happen. Rich people can be all kinds of jerky and greedy, but this is a house that has a steady income and is less likely to have to get desperate. So you probably, and this is where like the real world trickle down effect gets exaggerated and is, it's a political football that people just abuse. But this is where the trickle down effect actually has some merit. You're collecting all this extra produce for your lord. They're not going to care if a few extra apples go missing. They won't even know. There's so much. So yeah, you are going to see what's very likely a more well-fed peasantry in a realm. All over the Reach, that's probably true, but the Cider Hall peasants would be a particularly healthy lot. Apples are just really good for you. The digestion, it's really, it makes you feel more full than you are. So you might have a lot of just like really svelte, well-digested regular peasants. And they might have some pride in that. I don't know. Like, yeah, we're the best common folk around. We got the best situation here. And it's such a big tie to who they are, right? Like the Arbor, come back to them. This particular produce, it's a big association with who they are. It makes them their money. It's on all their, it's the apples are on everything. It's their sigil, right? It's just, yeah, they've really leaned into it. So there's also a little bit of extra pride probably in being a food producer in a realm that is particularly afflicted by long winters. And this is a region also, speaking of being a great place to live, it's not the farthest south, but the Reach doesn't get hit by winter as badly as, say, the Riverlands or the West, or certainly not the North. So it's got that going for it, too. Meanwhile, in addition to sitting back on their wealth and drinking their cider, the kind of things that the lords and now knights of Cider Hall could be proud of is just how many kings and queens and other lords and ladies have partaken of Cider Hall cider, how it's been consumed by the vast majority of all nobles who've ever existed, especially if you just focus on the Reach or the houses close by. Because there's obviously other houses making cider. Cider is ubiquitous. It's made all over Westeros. They make it beyond the wall. They make it in Dorne. It's just, yeah, apples are like that. They can grow almost anywhere. Which might be a symbolic thing for Fossoways to latch onto. We can handle anything, we Fossoways. Apples, they can handle anything. They can grow anywhere. We're diverse. We're tough. We're able to adjust to whatever you throw at us or wherever you throw us, because we're apples and we're easily hurled. Yeah. Let's talk about the coming of the Andals. That changed things, yet it also made them into what we're more familiar with today, because some of this pre-Andal stuff is just, well, we don't know. It's so far ago, and it wasn't written down. This could theoretically be a huge section of history, because it is a huge section of history. There's a lot that's implied here, thousands of years. But it's just so hazy. It's just, a lack of detail that makes that hard. Maybe one day we'll have a lot more. There's a lot there, but it isn't particularly developed. But it seems the Fossoways, like so many other houses, made that transition, and it might have gone easier for them in some ways. Maybe not. Might have been harder. They maybe had more to fight over, their wealth and their really excellent positioning, their great intra-reach location being as excellent as it is. This would have been when their motto, "A Taste of Glory," would have appeared, because house words are a Andal cultural thing. It may also be that the Andals were very familiar with all this. Like, I suppose it's likely that apple trees existed in Andalos too. It's possible that they came from there. Garth Greenhand, one of the things he brought over was one of the many foodstuffs they brought. Apples are particularly good for that sort of thing because, again, they're really adaptable. We'll talk about that more later when we get to the biology of it. But it's a smart thing to bring along because of that reason, because it's so diverse and able to handle a lot of climates. So I prefer the theory that the first men brought them, meaning apples, with them as part of their migration rather than finding apples already in Westeros. But that is very possible too, because animals spread apples by consuming them, and animals love apples, a lot of them, because, well, they're good, they're sweet, they're tasty. Animals, it's just the same reason humans like apples. And of course, if you're eating the seeds, you're spreading them around when you when that passes through you, because the seeds don't get digested by most animals. The Faith of the Seven might have held more power as an institution. That would be a reason why a lot of First Men houses liked Andalizing. Same reason a lot of real world kingdoms turned Christian or Muslim or what have you, because it's a more centralized religion. It gives you more power over your people. Pantheons don't give you as much power over the common folk. They just don't. There's too much variety. There's too much difference in what they want and what they believe is correct. Too many different laws. And yeah, if it's all focused into a central figure, you're easy to say, well, this godlike being demands this. It's harder to say that and have it mean something when you have 12 different godlike beings all demanding different things. You can pick the one you want. Be like, well, my god doesn't demand that. Right? But when there's one god, one person or one king or queen can be saying, hey, the god wants this, and you all have to do it. Right? It's just more power. So you can easily see why existing power structures, existing First Men houses were like, they might not have resisted so much. Like, yeah, this is actually more power for us. They might have actually, yes, they may have married Andal princesses, as so many of them did, rather than falling to conquest, because they saw this as the right path forward for them to A, hold their power, not lose it to the Andals, and B, increase their own power at the same time. And in fact, it was probably a no-brainer for a lot of them when they really sat down and thought about it. Those of them who bothered to do that. Those of them who could, having not been violently ejected from their lands. So the First Men Fossoways probably had some very substantial differences. Obviously, talking about things like polygamy is a massive difference, but it's clear that Andal culture really took. I mean, tourneys, knighthood, chivalry. This is stuff. The Reach loves these things thousands of years later, and they loved it then. So, yeah, there's always people who hate change, but I think the First Men houses saw the writing on the tree, and they could get ahead more by going with the flow rather than fighting against the inevitable. There had to have been a point, if it wasn't early on, where a lot of First Men kings and warlords and dynasties would say, there's just too many of these damn Andals. It's team up with them or die, And there would be some who'd be saying, yeah, die. Well, let's die. I will never join them. But most of them, obviously, that's just too anti-pragmatic. In a business-minded house, a house that's having to go with the flow of market forces. And yes, market forces existed thousands of years ago. They were different, but there's still things that affect that. Seasons, plague, population, migrations, war, obviously. So houses that are used to going with the flow and having to change their business arrangements based on what's happening out in the world. A lot of noble houses would be too stubborn to do that. They were like, no, we're in charge. We set the flow. We set the tone. We don't go with it. Well, houses that make their money from selling things, then they can't force the issue as much. So they might have a little more flexibility. But that, of course, always depends on who's in charge. And we're talking about thousands of years of different Fossoways. I'm sure there was a very wide array of characters in charge. In the Targaryen era, we definitely have a lot more to say about that. There's a lot more detail to the Targaryen era in general, not just about House Fossoway, as you all are pretty familiar. You have houses with thousands of years of history. This is a bigger adjustment phase, and it's more recent. So in terms of Andalizing happened so long ago, it's a haze, like we said. It's hard to say what was forced on them and what they've just adapted to now, or what they were like, yeah, let's do that. We like this change. Targaryen era came so recently, relatively speaking, then it's arguably was still they never fully adjusted to it, and now we are already perhaps past it or in the process of going past it. The Reach had a bigger adjustment than most, too, because unlike the North, unlike the Vale, unlike the West, unlike the Stormlands, well, the Stormlands sort of. The Stormlands was like a half bit of half and half. There wasn't as big of a change at the top, right? The Starks were still in charge after the Field of Fire and the burning of Harrenhal. The Arryns were still in charge. The Lannisters were still in charge. The Durrandons kind of became the Baratheons, but that was Durrandon blood. However, the Tyrells, that was a much bigger promotion than any of the ones who were promoted. The Tyrells were the steward house of Garth Green of House Gardner, right? So that was not a good thing for the Reach. They didn't like it. They didn't like having the steward house placed above them for eons following probably the proudest lineage in all of Westeros, certainly according to them. But it makes a good case given the way that all of Westeros looks at lineage and puts such importance on it. Oh, yeah, descended from Garth Greenhand? Yeah, that seems like a pretty big claim to fame. I can understand why that's important. Even if I wouldn't necessarily agree with it, it's certainly consistent. So the Tyrells being placed above them, that's a big drop-off in their prestige. Like, now we're ruled by dudes who were stewards for thousands of years. Before it was the first kings of Westeros, the proudest. Like, it's hard to be more than that. And then now it's the Tyrells. Now, of course, people have kind of gotten used to the Tyrells now 300 years later, but it still comes up a little bit. It's still like, yeah, those Tyrells, they're a little up-jumped, aren't they? Like, they're still a steward house. You know, now they're a royal house, sort of. So they've raised their profile in some ways, but that's now. Going back then, when the Gardeners were a recent thing, that would have been a big adjustment period. And this was part of the point, though. As I've said, when we've analyzed Aegon the Conqueror, he'd rather not have the Reach have the ability to rally under a single leader or a single family and come at him. He'd rather have the Reach mad at who's in charge of them, meaning the Tyrells, instead of him. So they'll take out their anger against the Tyrells, and they'll never unite behind the Tyrells to come after him or his descendants. So pretty smooth move by Aegon. And we wonder about how that translated into bitterness and bad feelings in houses like the Fossoways and how that played out. Certainly the TV show gave us some ideas. The book's a little different, so don't take Raymun Fossoway's and Steffan Fossoway's rantings about the Targaryens, which are surely the valid feelings that many people in the book world would have. Not necessarily those two characters, but there's good reasons why they would, too. I just want to be clear that the hatred of House Targaryen is amplified in House Fossoway in the TV show. So I'm not saying it's not there, but they definitely went farther with it. Still, it was backed by good reasons. Like Raymun and Steffan's reasons for disliking the Targaryens, or if not hating them in the show, was backed by events that would make you hate them. So it was very believable. And that's part of why I'm clarifying, because you could easily fall into the trap of thinking that the two are completely in sync on that, book and show. Not quite. It's close, though. And if you did conflate them, I wouldn't really press the issue, because it is probably that close. Because some Fossoways probably did die at the Field of Fire. They were very loyal to the Greenhands, like to the Gardeners, like so many others. There were probably Fossoways in the Order of the Green Hand, that order of knights that was all but extinguished at the Field of Fire. So yeah, some Fossoways probably burned alive that day. You don't forget that easily, especially when it's fairly recently after. But you also don't go wanting to repeat what happened at the Field of Fire. You say, okay, we gave it our shot. it went very badly. There was no apples shot off of any dragon's heads that day. Only one arrow landed on any of them. Visenya got hit by an arrow in the arm. It would be funny if that was a Fossoway arrow, but we don't have any idea. So you can see where the bad feelings would come from. Yes, and that's part of why Aegon made the arrangements he did. So those bad feelings would be, there'd be some separation between him and the ideas of vengeance. Fast forward to Jaehaerys. When he was young, the Lord Tyrell was Lord Bertrand. And this Tyrell was exactly the sort of Tyrell overlord that the Reach would be very displeased with. After all those proud Greenhand kings, gardeners, they had this guy, not a king, of course, but an alcoholic. So alcoholic that he one time got really sick. And then when he recovered, he fell off his horse, drunk, and died. He died falling off his horse. Like, yeah, that's oof. Lord Manfred Redwine, who was on the small council at the time, thought Lord Bertrand was a dolt. He said so in the histories. It's a recorded quote. Bertrand had a younger son named Martin. Martin's wife was a Florence Fossoway. And Martin was put in charge of the Reach's income. So, I mean, this is an interesting little tidbit about how the Tyrells transitioned to ruling. They had so much experience as stewards that the lower ranked Tyrells, the second and third sons, could still get that job. They'd still be quite potentially well suited for that role, given it was their family role for literally thousands of years. Now, Martin, under him, he didn't seem like necessarily such a smart guy. He didn't seem like he was a real bright. Not a dolt like Lord Bertrand, but not bright. Yet, the incomes did really well under him. Like, really well. Improvements at Highgarden, elsewhere in the Reach, like, profits were up. Efficiency was up. Lots of things were going well. And Septon Barth took note of this, because Septon Barth, man from the Reach, he is familiar with Reach politics, Reach families, and just obviously a very smart and well-read person in general. He sussed it out. He realized that it was Lady Florence behind the scenes. Some sort of math genius. She'd been growing up counting apples. Her nickname was the Apple Counter. And she basically was telling him what to do or giving him all the good advice. And so all these great moves made by Martin were actually her idea. Now, you got to give the dude a little credit. This is some dummy just doing what his wife says, because she's not even in the council meetings. So he has to at least be able to communicate what's going on to her. But she's the one making all the really smart calls here. And so it's a kind of a teamwork thing where he's the front and she's the brains. Barth figured this out. He understood. He's sussed it all out. He's like, you know what? It's her. But he didn't blow that up. He decided to let them have their secret. And when the time came for a replacement, because Jaehaerys had a really gifted master of coin named Rigo Draz. He was Pentashi. His nickname was the Lord of Air. He was very good at being a master of coin. But he got murdered during a plague. Things were bad. People blamed him because he's a foreigner. And after punishing the perpetrators personally, Jaehaerys went and searched for a new one. And Barth put forward Martin Tyrell to be the new master of coin at the Red Keep. And Jaehaerys, always willing to listen to Septon Barth, always took his advice. Well, often took his advice, certainly considered it because the man gave good advice. Said, okay, let's do it. And he didn't actually tell the king what the deal was. He's like, you know what? I don't need to. Nothing good could come of me spilling the secret. Let's let them keep their secret. Let Lady Florence keep running things from behind the scenes. The realm will benefit. Septon Barth did the right thing, I suppose, by keeping that under wraps. And it worked. Martin sat the council, passed on the information to his wife, and then Lady Florence would make these really good decisions, and he would get the credit, and those people in the know would know what was really going on. But she effectively ran the treasury. I mean, she was in charge of the purse strings of Westeros for a good stretch during one of the most prominent times of the most prominent reign, meaning, and I mean prominent in terms of Jaehaerys was doing a lot to improve the realm at this point, spending money, building things, logistics, that sort of thing. Nina points out that this happened again many years later with Derrin II. Ronald Penrose was master of coin, but it was actually his wife, Elena Targaryen, that running the ship. So, by the way, Elena Targaryen, if I recall correctly, was one of our winners for Topic Smith this year, so we'll be doing an episode on her as well. There's also a hope that Lady Florence would become friends with Alysanne, Queen Alysanne, because Queen Alysanne was grieving over the death of her daughter, Daenerys. But unfortunately, there's no real follow-up on this. We don't hear if they did become friends or not. We only hear that there was a hope of such. We do know that Lyman Beesbury was eventually made Master of Coin by Jaehaerys. Remember, Lyman Beesbury is still Master of Coin when the Dance of the Dragons breaks out. So he's probably the one that took over after Florence and Martin. I suppose it could have been Martin's death that ended that whole arrangement. It's possible she died first, which would have also ended it. But it seems that they held the post for a very long time, and the realm benefited. The biggest direct benefit of her being the behind-the-scenes manager of the Crown's money is that this was the road-building era, right? This is when the King's Road, the River Road, the Rose Road, the Ocean Road, the Gold Road were made from paths into roads, real roads with stones and markers and, in some cases, defense and probably other like mile markers, just things like infrastructure, right? This money came from her management. They would not have been enough for it otherwise. So when any Westerosi person is wandering the roads, they should thank the old king, yes, for pushing this in the first place, but Lady Florence Fossoway, probably the person who facilitated it the most. It was the old king's decision, but her effort, her calculations, her quality management of the treasury. Chatty Lumpkin sends a big super chat from Canada and says, Happy Easter! This should get you at least 4 chocolate bunnies, or better, a bunch of chocolate-covered apples. I have to go make dinner, but we'll catch up later. Well, thank you very much, Chatty Lumpkin, and thank you all to the rest of you. I'm hopeful that we can be a part of your Easter while you're hanging out with your friends and family, listening to us, either this episode or something else from our catalog. We're very privileged to be a part of that, to be part of y'all's holiday celebrations, or just traveling to and from the holidays. Maybe you're listening to us in the car as you're driving to be with your family for Easter. Maybe you're catching this later as you're driving home. Either way, I feel very thankful that we can be a part of that. Such an important time for everyone's families, getting together like that. The Reds Stay Green is our next section. The Fossoways fought with the Greens, like most of the Reach did during the dance. I mean, apple's turning black. Ugh, that's kind of gross, right? Ugh, the black apple? I would not eat that. Actually, maybe I would. It might look really cool. It's kind of like a purplish dark. Maybe I would. Show me this black apple, then I will decide whether I want to eat it. But usually that means rotten, right? Like, yeah. Ugh. So he marched with the host under Lord Ormond Hightower, meaning whoever the Fossoway lord of the time was. And this would have been supported by Prince Derrin and the Blue Queen Tessarion. So they would have been part of the army that did it right. The one army that had a dragon with it, that used that dragon properly. They had a good management of roles there. The dragon worked well with the army. The army worked well with the dragon. They fought in concert together. Things that Caraxes and Vagar and the other dragons didn't do so much of. But this didn't last very long, right? The fight, they may have been at the Battle of Honeywine, the Fossoways, but they may have just been waiting farther north at their castle to join Lord Ormond as he marched north, because that's where he was headed. Ormond's headed north to go to King's Landing. I don't know why necessarily the Fossoways would march south to join them and then just march right back north with them. May as well just, hey, we'll join you on the way. That's probably what happened, but I don't know for sure. The most famous apple of the era was a member of the Caltrops. So it wasn't his battlefield work that we're familiar with. And this is Owen Fossoway, Lord Owen Fossoway. And he may have been the final Lord of Cider Hall. He's certainly the last Lord we know of, because at some point after the dance, but before Ashford, they get demoted to Knightly House. So this, like I said, might have been the last one. Now, what happened with him specifically, Lord Owen. First, we have the first Battle of Tumbleton, which goes well for the Greens, and they take the city. They flip the two betrayers to their side at some point, probably prior to the battle, and then they expect to rule over the two betrayers and dominate them, and because they're lowborn, right? And Hobart Hightower takes charge because he's the highest ranking guy there. Ormond was killed in the first Battle of Tumbleton.
Excuse me.
Hobart was killed.
Hobart
Hightower was killed in that, or was rather, Ormond was killed and Hobart took over. And Hobart was just not very, shall we say, a strong personality. And that's why the two betrayers started to get more and more uppity, especially Hugh Hammer started making royal pretensions and all that. And that got people upset. The nobles of the Reach who were still there and alive formed the Caltrops. Lucky 13 of them. I don't know if they don't have the same idea of lucky numbers as we do here in the real world. So maybe they didn't recognize the unluckitude of 13. Anyway, as we know, the whole Caltrops thing didn't work out so well for the Caltrops or for anybody, really. They were getting ready to murder Hugh Hammer, but before they could do that, the second Battle of Tumbleton broke out, and 8 of the 13 Caltrops were killed during it, including Lord Owen. So, very ignominious fall there, trying to work behind the scenes, trying to do murder. Just poor leadership all around. He wasn't in charge. It was usually Lord Peake, and before that, Lord Ormond Hightower. So we can't blame him for too much, but he certainly doesn't come out looking good either. Now, if we look forward to the next major civil war, it would be the Blackfire Rebellion. Just as it was during the dance, Fossoway, you can't go black, right? Black apples again. They just, no, stay. They're already red. Stay that way. But again, this has to be filtered through the lens of their liege lord. It's possible they didn't do a whole lot because Leo Longthorn and Tyrell, he fought some battles, but those battles were in and around the Reach against houses that did go black. The Fossoways were not at the Redgrass Field. Leo Longthorn was not at the Redgrass Field. So it's possible the Fossoways were actually there, but we're 99% chance no, because they would have been following Leo Tyrell. He's their liege lord. He was the battle commander. Since he did take the field, they'd be with him. Right? Well, I don't know why they'd break off and head to the Redgrass Field. We don't really hear about Reachmen on the Redgrass Field for the most part. It's mostly Daemon's host, which would have had some Reachmen in it, but not on the side of the Reds. The Reds were Rivermen, Dornishmen, Stormlanders, and Valemen. That was the majority of the force that fought at the Redgrass Field for the Loyalists. But yeah, there was a lot of fighting in the Reach, and it was Marcher houses that, lesser Marcher houses that fought for Daemon. So, and a lot of them were martial. They joined him because they were like him or of his, cut from the same cloth. Like they were warrior types, knightly, maybe even chivalrous. They liked fighting. And they saw it as a way up, a way to maybe rise the ranks, fight for the winning side, get promotions, get new lands, get new titles. So that's interesting because we do know that it was probably by this time that the Fossoways had lost their status as lords and been demoted to knights. If they had already lost, again, it happened between 130 and 209 that they lost their status. So we don't know when. It's just a pretty wide range there. But if it was prior to the Redgrass Field, it's interesting that they stayed loyal because that would have been a way, like Sir Eustace Osgrey. That's one of the reasons he took up with Daemon Blackfire, was to get lands back that his family had taken away from him because of prior reverses. This could have been a good opportunity for the Fossoways to say, hey, Daemon, we'll join you if you put us back up on the lordly level. That's our ask. But apparently that's not what happened. Either their demotion hadn't yet happened, or it was not the opportunity they saw. They're like, no, I don't think so. I think we're going to stay loyal. The Lord Fossoway at the time, or the Sir Fossoway at the time, stayed red. There might have been multiple factors, but Daemon Blackfire's the call of Daemon, the allure of Daemon Blackfire was not sufficient. All right, I've talked about it quite a few times, brought it up here and there. Let's actually talk about this demotion. with some focus as directly rather than just speaking around it. This could be an under the radar aspect to what Sir Stefan was doing. Remember, he wanted to be made a lord by Aerion. That was the deal. He probably asked for that. It wasn't say, hey, what will you give me for this? He's like, so that adds a whole extra dimension to it. He wasn't seeking to gain a lordship so much as he was looking to have it restored. Right? So that's a smaller ask too, when you think about it. Like, being promoted to lord is a big deal, but if it's a house that was a lordly house for thousands of years and has only not been for a few decades, it's a smaller change. The problem is we don't know what put them in that place in the first place. What exactly are you reversing? What decision, which king, it was probably a king that did this. It might have been a Lord Tyrell, but probably a king. Why? What was the reason? It could have been something really serious, in which case it's a hard thing to reverse, but it could have just been like Aegon the Unworthy didn't like apples. Maybe he drank too much of their cider, had a bad hangover, and blamed it on them. You know, like, I would not put anything past that guy. Maybe some Fossoway girl he didn't like, she treated him badly, you know. You know what I mean by that? Like, didn't please him, failed to please him properly. So it could be something real petty, like the teats being given back and forth between the Blackwoods and the Brackets, that kind of nonsense that Aegon IV engaged in. That could easily be it. Now, on the other hand, if that was it, you'd think it would have been reversed. Right? Like, that guy did it, let's just forget that happened. Let's make you lords again. So maybe it's not that, because the argument for reversing it would have been pretty strong. As we said, it wasn't because they fought for the Blackfires. That doesn't explain it. Maybe it was cheating the crown of tax revenues. They're a mercantile operation. Maybe there was some very long, like some Enron level accounting fraud, some very substantial amount of money withheld from the crown or from their liege lord or both. I could see that being, and that's a pretty big shame, you know, something that gets them demoted, but they can't pay it all back because we're talking about such a huge amount of money that was swindled over the centuries, maybe. Something big. Nina has another idea that I like. There were false Darrons, if you recall, after or during the reign of Aegon III. Remember, Prince Derrin the Daring, the story of his death is told many different ways at the Second Battle of Tumbleton. It was. And then because his death was uncertain, there were false Darrons that appeared claiming to be him, and there were some small to-dos about that. And these happened in the Reach. So maybe Cider Hall got mixed up in one of these false Darrons, and it went very badly for them. It didn't go well for them. None of these went well for anyone who got involved, except for the ones who stayed loyal, of course, because that's who won. But yeah, I mean, if the Hightowers were in on it, like the Hightowers are the ones who knew Prince Derrin. He lived there. He squired there. So if a Hightower comes out and says, this is Prince Derrin, that is believable. You know, that's at least credible, even if it's not true. It has the ring of truth to it because these are people who would have credibility on that. So on the other hand, the Hightowers didn't get demoted for any of these false Darron things. Maybe they lost status and prestige, but it'd be a lot to make the Lords of Old Town a knightly house. So maybe that would be a huge demotion. So maybe that's part of it. Either way, it's a good theory that they were involved in one of these smaller revolutions or rebellions that didn't go very well, and that was what got them demoted. Maybe they were scapegoated too, because no one else seems to have been demoted. We've got all these houses that descend from Garth Greenhand, his first children, and this is the only house that's knightly. The rest are all lordly, and of course they were lordly. So yeah, it's a little unusual, a little confusing, but something to think about. Ashford Meadow, yeah, let's talk about Ashford itself. Here is one of my favorite introductions by way of puns, plural, quote.
I may not be ripe, but my good cousin is rotten to the core. Knock the seeds out of him.
I'm always going to remember the way Sean Thomas delivered that line, too. It was great. It was like, that's exactly how I wanted that line to be delivered. I didn't even know it. You know, knock the seeds out of him. So many puns all in one line there. Yeah. Maybe I can't think of a punnier introduction in all of A Song of Ice and Fire Knight of the Seven Kingdoms / World of Ice and Fire. All the Martin-verse stuff. I don't know of a punnier one. There might be one. I'm open to nominations. Please throw your punny nominations at me. I will judge them and laugh at them, not at you, because I love puns. But it's actually 100% accurate, right? Sir Stefan does turn out to be the second biggest villain, rotten to the core, of the story, after Aerion, who, of course, he teams up with. Villains flooding, villains playing with villains here. Now, Aerion is the villain you see coming. Stefan's introduction, he's more like, this guy's a jerk. He's an ass. He isn't necessarily an antagonist. He isn't necessarily the bad guy, or not the bad guy. But he is. He's actually an example of corrupted knightly values. Someone that uses the cover of knighthood to do kind of crappy things, which is very, very, very against what Dunk is, right? That is the anti-Dunk right there. Like, Dunk, again, isn't probably really a knight, but is more one than any other. And Raymun comes along and is like, hey, we have a lot in common in that regard. Raymun wasn't a knight, but he acted more like one than anybody else there, except for perhaps Dunk. And then became one because of that behavior and earning it and being worthy and stepping up when the time came. When someone needed to step up, he did it. I mean, right? So he you see coming, I think, more so. So it's just, to me, it's really neat and fun how big a part of the story the Fossoways are, not just as their characters and their presence, but what they stand for. And how they're two sides of the same apple, I don't know, coin, whatever. Like Stefan and Raymun, just very opposites, yet so close to each other. The apple does fall far from the tree. Let me address that real quickly, because it's kind of a funny backwards thing. The phrase "the apple falls far from the tree" or "never falls far from the tree" is a euphemism for people are like their parents, like people are like their families. You grow up, you end up a lot like the tree you came from. What's funny about that is really not true for apple trees. Apples that grow from seeds don't turn out like the trees they came from. You have to use the rootstock to get them to have genetic copies. So seeds don't do that way. Seeds are very random, which is a good thing. I'll explain later. But here, it's not. And it's funny because if an apple doesn't go far from the tree, it's not going to grow because it's going to attempt to sprout under another tree that's already big, grown fully, and taking all the light. So that's a bad place you need to get farther away to grow. So the apple should fall far from the tree. The better apples do fall farther from the tree. The more successful apples work out that way. If you don't leave the tree, you're not gonna thrive, y'all, if you're an apple. So back to Stefan. It looks like he's going to fight for Dunk. And it's really clever, just the writing here, because you see that he's doing it for the wrong reasons. That's not hidden. You're like, oh, this guy, he's out for glory, a taste of glory. It's their freaking motto, for gosh sake. But that works. You're like, I'll take it. I don't necessarily want him fighting on those terms, but I need people to fight for me. That's the first order of business here. Why he's fighting for me is less important than the fact that he's going to fight for me. And that just sets aside all your suspicions. Like, all right, well, this guy's in, he's not in it for the right reasons, but his reasons are 1,000% believable. He wants glory. Absolutely believable. A bajillion% believable. So you set your suspicions aside. Most of us do. So when his turn comes, it's like, wow, I should have seen that coming, but the writing was so good, you thought you had a motivation nailed down for this guy. And no, his motivation was much bigger. His motivation from the beginning, from the moment he offered it to Dunk, was to gain favor with Aerion. He may have had the idea to get that lordship the moment he saw what was happening. The moment the trial by 7 was announced, Stefan might have had that idea. He's like, I got a move I can make right here. His villainous wheels were turning in his brain, the little gears shifting here and there. He found that play and it worked. He's like, yeah, well, Aerion wouldn't have given me much for it if it didn't screw over Sir Duncan. I think the show line was he wouldn't have accepted, but for it thwarted Sir Duncan. Yeah, it only worked because he had gotten an arrangement in the first place. Like, I can't screw over Sir Duncan if he doesn't think I'm on his team. So yeah, it was extremely well done. Raymun doubts his motivations. Dunk doubts his motivations. We doubt his motivations, but then we see, oh, it's glory. That fits. But no, that was Lordship, restoring a lordship. If the topic of the lost Fossoway lordship had been thrown into the mix in the Hedge Knight, people might have sussed that out. You might have been like, oh, that's what his angle is. But just make me a lord, that's coming after the fact that you don't necessarily tie that together, yet it still fits. It's the kind of reward a man like that would seek. It's just you don't know that there's a history behind that reward. So the Fossoways were huge in the story, as we saw. There's no subtracting that. I mean, they're as big as anyone. Not literally. Dunk was taller. But actually, Raymun's taller than Sean Thomas. All of them are. Like, everyone's smaller, right? Except for maybe Egg. Like, Dunk is 6 inches shorter than Book Dunk. Laughing Storm, ditto. Raymun, ditto. They're all, like, just smaller. Anyway, but whatever. That's Maekar is smaller. That's just how it goes. All TV characters, you just kind of have to go with that. So Dunk had a very diverse group with him, right? You had people there for a variety of reasons, for honor, for Dunk's friendship, for revenge, for just to test themselves against the Kingsguard, maybe in Lionel's case. Aryans was not, though. He had 3 Targaryens, 3 Kingsguard, and a Fossoway. So yeah, that's just kind of stands out, doesn't it? And then after the fact, it stands out for the wrong reasons. We had Targaryens and Fossoways on both sides, but everybody already kind of hated Aryan, and Dunk was, and Derrin was kind of like people don't have strong opinions on him one way or the other. He's kind of forgettable. But Baelor, that would have had a big effect because, yeah, despite what the show gave us, Baelor was popular, just not as popular with some people as we might have thought. So Stefan was aiming to regain that lordship instead of his taste for glory and his rise. It probably backfired horribly. We don't know the full extent of it, but Ashford became very famous after the fact. And man, what is he? He looks like the biggest heel, right? He joined the other side, which isn't going to make him popular. He was reneged on a deal to Sir Duncan. That's bad because Sir Duncan goes on to become more and more famous, popular with the commons. And this is the guy that betrayed him. That's a bad look. So he looked like a heel for nothing. In fact, for negative value. And he probably broke some ribs, apparently. So for a man who wanted a taste of glory, he bit into a wormy apple instead. And I'd like to think that his life was permanently tied to this deed of his. You know, he may have aimed for some sort of redemption to try to look good in the long run, but this doesn't seem like the kind of person he was. He just probably eventually inherited the Cider Hall and became an even worse person because he had even more power to throw around. And yeah, I don't suppose his reputation among the nobility was good either, though. I mean, going against Dunk, I don't know if people cared about that too much amongst the nobility. Some of them would. Certainly his cousin did, and some of the other people that fought with Dunk. But overall, I think there'd be a lot of shrugging about that, kind of like how the nobility laughed at Dunk or farted at him or whatever. But joining Aryan, though, I don't know about that. That's just, especially after the fact, especially saw what kind of person he was, more time passing, and Aryan just continues to not be a good person. I don't think that's a good look. He looks ambitious. He looks opportunistic. Doesn't look honorable. And doesn't come out looking like a great fighter either. He couldn't beat his cousin who had just been knighted. In fact, lost to him. Yeah, it backfired horribly. I mean, he didn't die. That would have been worse, I guess. But his reputation may have been in the toilet like forever because of that. Now, of course, no one should feel sorry for him. He almost certainly still inherited Cider Hall, and I don't know why you'd feel sorry for a jerk like that anyway, but he probably had a life that was a mixture of people, everybody hated him, but he also just had mostly what he wanted all the time. But he probably wanted more. He probably wanted to be seen differently and would have never had that. So karma, my man, just karma. He might have become even more hated over time because of as Dunk's popularity raised and Egg's popularity as well and other things, then that could translate to an even bigger dislike of the man who was such a villain towards him. On the other hand, Raymun's behavior would paint quite the contrast. People would love to remember this guy. The stories people would tell about these two Fossoways night and day. You know, the good apple, the bad apple, the green and the red. it's very gossipy. It's the type of thing you would talk about. It's interesting, like these two family members that divided at such an important moment, creating such a great story, like in-world story. It's great. The Hedge Knight's great, but I'm talking about what it meant to people in-world. Raymun made a name for himself. He made a friend for himself. And we know their relationship is more to come. We don't know what it is, but there's zero chance there's not more to come. George has said there's more to come. We would have guessed confidently that there was anyway, but George has flat out said we'll see Raymun again. There's plans to see Raymun again anyway. So he's the sort of friend everyone needs. Like, there's very few characters like him in A Song of Ice and Fire. We love comparing him to Podrick, and there is a lot of parallel there. Lots of parallels there. But it's different the way the need is, right? Like, Dunk really, really needed this more. He's new in the world. He's trying to find his place. He needed help more than Brienne did. Now, Brienne needed help for sure, but Dunk, this guy's coming in there naive without any ideas. Way more naivete than Brienne, who was pretty naive, but Dunk is also younger. So, also they're linked thematically. There's just a lot of things that George aligned with them personality-wise that makes their friendship, I guess, more believable. Not that it isn't. Not that it was never unbelievable. It just fits really well. Little things that make it work. Like, Dunk and Egg are both kind to animals in book and show. That's a green flag, right? And here we have Green Apple Raymun doing similar things, like taking care of Dunk's horses for him. Maybe more for Dunk than for the horses in the book version, but in both versions, he takes care of the horses. And then, of course, Sweetfoot gets that very sweet send-off in the show as well, which, you gotta love that. Having that associated with Raymun just does even more for making us love the guy. Now, speaking about the stories that would be told about Ashford afterwards, I mean, throw the telephone game in there afterwards, and you have the most villainous Stefan stabbing Dunk in the back at the last minute, and the heroic Raymun stepping forward to try to erase, or at least stand in contrast to his cousin's dark deeds here. Just the bards, the musicians, the guy who sits at the bar and loves to be the center of attention when people are buying him drinks, like Ulf the White. Would love to tell stories like this. Is a great story, right? There's multiple stories. The stories of Baelor, the stories of Dunk and Egg, the stories of Raymun, the stories of Stefan, the stories of them together, the stories we don't know about that happened afterwards. People would be talking in the world about these stories that we haven't yet heard. That the Raymun's devotion would be just the example, the guy to be like Raymun. Yeah, be like that. That's how many knights told their squires, be like Raymun Fossoway, right? Or how many knights, when they came knights, saying, I want to be like Raymun Fossoway. This is my spirit animal, or my spirit apple, spirit fruit. Yeah, and they might even have these conversations over a cup of cider. That might be even what starts. They'd be like, it's cider. Yeah, Fossoways. How about that Raymun guy? Or how about that villainous Stefan? Yeah, there's just a lot to say there. And it's a real statement on people and families, a big thing of what A Song of Ice and Fire is about. Yeah, mostly we're dealing with noble families, but noble families have that going for them. They have the power and wealth to make world-shaking things happen when they have conflict. They can be the best friends. They can be the worst rivals. They can be big heroes. They can be big villains. Sometimes they can be multiples of those things, even the ones that don't really align. So his frustration with House Targaryen in book, Raymun's amplified in the show, would be a nice fit for their demotion. That could be a little extra angle to why Raymun and Stefan hate the Targaryens so much, because of that demotion. Because that's almost certainly who did it, right? We throw out some guesses as to why. And Book Raymun didn't necessarily hate the Targaryens. He may have felt sorry for them, like Maekar's sons. The vibe's a little different in the book version. Either way, it's the thing people gossip about. They're the royals, right? And he was complimentary to Baelor and didn't say negative things about Aerys and Rhaegal, meaning Raymun did. So yeah, the tone's a little different about his Targaryen takes in the book. He even had reasons to pity Maekar. He himself knows what it's like to be down the line, Raymun's not even a second son because he's not in the main line, not in the main branch. He's in the junior branch. Of course, he ended up forming his own branch, but not at the time. That hadn't yet happened. So off page, even if Book Raymun was more anti-Targaryen than we may have realized, that would have changed a bit after the fact, right? He would have seen the kind of person Egg was, and that Dunk was now tied to them, and, you're the friend of my friends, etc. And also, after splitting with his family, Raymun might have started thinking ahead more and been like, I need some land. If I want to do my own thing, I need to get a parcel of land, which I don't know if going against the royal house is the way to go about that. So just from pure pragmatic angle, he might have been wanted them on his side. And just one last tidbit about Raymun and his shield change. You can't just decide to make a cadet branch on a whim. So in both book and show, when he's like Green Apple Fossoways or I'm not this anymore, that's unofficial. That's just him saying, I want to distinguish we've seen a bajillion lesser son, second sons, third sons, whatever, just do a different version of their sigil. Bloodraven, the younger phrase, like everybody does it. So this is not necessarily a sign of new house exists now. Now, when he did found the house and they established the founding story, they 1,000% include him changing his sigil. And she's like, that was the moment you could say the house actually began, but it wasn't official until they got a charter. They got land. New Barrel wasn't New Barrel until he had a writ, a deed, right? Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back with a bit more. A couple of questions from y'all. Adornish Dame 383 says, I wonder if the fearsomely strong cider served at the Quill and Tankard is sourced from the Fossoways. I wonder that too. We have a little section on where else cider is served here near the end of the episode, or actually not near the end of the episode, here close to the middle actually. And it could be. Maybe they get a stronger version from them, or maybe they distill it a little bit. Distilled apple cider is apple brandy. Brandy is just distilled wine, but I don't know what the difference between apple wine and distilled apple cider would be. But either way, yeah. So they could distill it a little bit, or they could just make it their own. Either way, but it's possible, yeah. Guilty Undertaker said, if the Hobbit taught us anything, you can just float barrels of apples downstream. Hey, that's a good point. People might steal those, but the apples are awfully plentiful, so they could afford to lose a few. Given the savings they would rack up by not having to use boats, just throwing the barrels downstream. You can afford to lose a few. Cost of doing business, Shay and I were joking right before the episode here about Stefan teaching Raymun, and that's not the Fossoway to do things, there's a proper way and there's a Fossoway. Given all the apple puns, I'm surprised there's no Adam Fossoway. There's no Adam's apples in Westeros. That's too specific to the real world, too specific to Christianity or whatever, as an origin for that
Garth's
phrase.
Apple.
What's that?
Your Garth's apple.
Your Garth's apple. Your Foss's apple. Yeah, but yeah, that would be funny to have a little Adam Fossoway as a little Easter egg joke. I was once in Santa Fe. Hanging out with one of George's assistants, and we went to his theater where we saw some comedians. And it was a very funny setup. I think I've described this once before, but this is a good time to bring it back because of the content. Now, the setup was this. 16 local comedians, 15 of whom are high. They'd smoked pot right before the show. The audience had to figure out, using the eliminate thing, like a vote people off kind of deal, just by applause, which comedian was sober. So we had to figure. We actually did it. I wasn't that good at it. I thought I'd be better at it. But the crowd as a whole, I was part of the crowd, and we succeeded in sorting out which comedian was sober. The first of the 16 was so blatantly high, he didn't last at all, because what we figured the process was they would answer questions, and the way they answered their question, you would be like, okay, this guy's high or isn't. And the first guy was like, what would you do if you had $1 million? That was the question. And the first comedian's like, apples. I do something with apples. That guy is high as hell. He just blurts out the word apples when asked what he would do with $1 million. And he just says apples. Yeah, anyway. So not that relevant, but apples. So, and funny. No, anymore. I don't see any more questions from y'all, but let's give a shout out to those of you who support us on Patreon. It is super important for us, especially episodes like this, because you patrons picked this one. And if you join our Patreon, you can help pick episodes in the future as well. We have levels as low as $5 a month, and going all the way up to much, much higher that gets you access to things like our scripts and notes, shout outs occasionally, and obviously the voting I mentioned before. But most of all, you get access to our bonus episode catalog, which is pretty substantial. It's a lot of extra episodes. So if you've already heard our whole catalog and you want more, $5 a month or more will get you that and more. You can also support the show by going to our website and using the shopping links. Amazon being the most prominent of those. Anything you buy at Amazon. Amazon's a great place to shop to get things really quickly. We use it a lot. We use Prime to get things. A lot of times, there's been a number of times where we've had to order a piece of gear for our podcasting and video setup. Something breaks, a cord here and there, and we need to have that quickly.
And we like to shop locally when we can, but often that really specific thing is not there, and we need it within one day, or we'd have to cancel our episode, postpone it.
Well said. Yeah, Amazon has saved a few of our episodes, at least over the years, and I totally agree with the Shay. Yeah, we prefer to shop locally, but sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. You need things quickly, and so you can, if you shop through Amazon on our links, going through our site, you get charged the same amount, and we get a little benefit from it. Let us move on to the Reds Turn Green. So yeah, the offshoot of Ashford, of course, was the formation of House Fossoway of New Barrow. Let's talk about how that might have gone down, because all we know is just those little tidbits that were dropped sort of as Easter eggs or Easter apples in both book and show about what was to come. But the actual formation of the house wouldn't have been so simple. Like I said, it couldn't just be Raymun changed his sigil and there you go. This is where the nicknames Red Apple Fossoway and Green Apple Fossoway came from. There's no reason to differentiate when there was only one kind of Fossoway. The Green are knightly also, since they came along after Ashford, and the Reds were also already a knightly house, not lordly anymore. So they became Green, also knightly. We don't have house words for them, though. Nina chose ripened by trial. Nina's so good at coming up with fun house words. This is a really good one. I hardly even knew to explain what the implication is there. Ripened by trial. He spoke of not being ripe enough. Then he fought in the trial. And then soon after, they have their own house, formed a cadet branch. So yeah, ripened by trial. It all happened because of Ashford Meadow. I like that. So sometime after Ashford is when these things became official. Obviously, Raymun didn't just go home and have land after Ashford. In fact, it may have been a big to-do, given that the two Fossoways at Ashford were on opposite sides of the trial. That may have caused some family strife. Now, Raymun was the guy in the right, but Stefan's the higher-ranking one. So I don't know how it went. It may have been a serious dividing line in the family. Maybe not, but it's more fun to assume conflict in these fictional settings, right? Nina's guess, and it's my favorite guess, is that Raymun fought in the Third Blackfire Rebellion and performed well. And of course, whenever there's a big civil war like this, there's a lot of houses that get stripped of their lands. There you go. There's your very straightforward opportunity for the Green Apple Fossoways to get land. Fighting for the loyalists, winning, getting rewarded from lands taken from the losing side. That's super standard, very believable. We don't actually know where New Barrow is, but besides being in the Reach, but would guess that it was taken from a lord or knightly house on the losing side. So this is 10 years after Ashford, when the Third Blackfire Rebellion was, that is. So once again, just like previous engagements, like in the Dance of the Dragons, they would have fought under their liege lord. Now, Leo Longthorn was sick in 212, so he may have been dead by the time of the Third Blackfire Rebellion. But still, it would have been the Tyrell banners at the top. Now, by the time this happened, Raymun may have had a different attitude about Aegon, and this is King Aerys, the first in charge, and the Great Spring Sickness had already happened, so a lot had changed. Raymun may have been a different person by then. He'd been a little bit older, a little more experienced. His views on politics might have been a little different. Who knows? either way, it's pretty straightforward. There's rebel lands to redistribute after the war. Robert's Rebellion, that's how Davos probably got his lands, from Connington lands. Lothor Brune got lands there. Daemon Blackfire had a castle for a while. It's gone now, probably, or given to somebody else. So there's just lots of examples like this. We don't need more. It's even possible that the Great Spring Sickness wiped out a few houses entirely. So there could have been new land to redistribute before the Third Blackfire Rebellion, given that. And that may have been where the Green Apple Fossoways got their land. But I feel like there has to have been something he did to earn it. And fighting for Dunk might not have been enough, although... because, Egg might have given that land, but Egg doesn't become king for so much longer. Maybe Egg convinced Maekar to do it. Maybe Egg convinced King Aerys. Maybe Egg convinced Maekar to convince King Aerys. Either way, it's a very good place to plant our flag in the ground as the most likely possibility for where New Barrel got its lands. It's even possible nowadays, it hasn't been that long, right, in terms of Ashford Meadow. Let's say New Barrel was founded roughly 10 years after Ashford Meadow. So around 219, we'll round it to 220. That means 78 years before A Song of Ice and Fire. In that time, given the Reds were demoted, it's possible the Greens had overtaken the Reds in terms of prominence. Overtaking them in wealth is maybe unlikely given how long the Reds have been accumulating cider money. But having more land and being richer doesn't mean you have a better product. It's possible that they innovated and came up with some better cider, right? Are they in competition with each other? Do they share recipes? Is the Green Apple Fossoway cider different than the red? You would hope so, because more options seems like a good thing. Like, everybody doesn't want just the same cider all the time. And when we get to our little brief section on real world cider, oh my God, there are so many varieties of ciders and ways to make it. In part because there's just an absurd number of apple species out there. So part of this leads to the possibility of, given such a wide variety of options and possibilities and theoretical recipes for cider, the Greens could have gotten ahead. They're like, hey, our cider's just better. The Reds might have had less reason to innovate. They're the biggest game in town. People are going to buy their cider no matter what. But here comes the upstart Green Apple Fossoways. They need a way to get ahead. We can't just be the same smaller version of the same house selling the same cider. We're not going to get a leg up doing that. We need to innovate. And that might be what happened. And maybe they innovated so well that they overtook the Reds. Maybe not. I mean, maybe just it helped get them on equal footing. And when we see in current time, we get to the A Song of Ice and Fire section of this episode, the Fossoways in modern times are working together. The Greens and the Reds seem kind of inseparable. It's almost like they just kind of went back to being one house in some ways, which maybe implies New Barrel is not super far from Cider Hall. You'd be hard-pressed to find a reader who would guess we'll never see Raymun again. And when we say Blackfire 3 is very likely, we don't think it's the only time. In fact, more recent comments by George indicate that there'll be several opportunities to see Raymun if things go the way they're planned. Yes, when I said hard-pressed, it was a cider pun. Let's talk about the bad apple. Ser Derrick Fossoway. He was an exception to the colorful pattern because he had a so-called black reputation, which we just got through saying these black apples sound very untasty. But, what does it mean? What does a black reputation mean? Ambitious and one is for a certainty. Now, ambition isn't necessarily a bad thing, but this guy's ambition was murderous, ruthless. I don't know, but not a good person, but successful in being not good. He couldn't have just been an ordinary knight because he's in the Band of Nine. The Band of Nine was Maelys the Monstrous, Captain General of the Golden Company, biggest sellsword company there is, it ever has been. There's pirate captains. There's other famous sellsword captains. There's Aliquo Silvertongue, right? This guy was like a major political operator. So how is a knight get into this company with sellsword captain, 10,000 strong, like merchant princes, pirate cat? Like, how does just a knight get in there? So the implication is that he was more than just a knight. That may have been his highest title, but he had done something of note, or several somethings of note, to establish himself. For one thing is certain, that he was exiled from the Seven Kingdoms. So something that was like not a capital charge, but got him kicked out. Something bad, but not bad enough to be executed for. I don't know. I mean, that's not super uncommon for the nobility to get to evade the death penalty. But exile is less common than just some severe penalty or taking the black, right? Like taking the black is more common. You're sent to the wall. So this maybe implies that he was exiled in part because they didn't catch him. He got away, and so they declared him in exile. He's unlawful as a resident of Westeros, but this wasn't a penalty inflicted on him after he was caught and tried, right? Because if he was, maybe he probably would have been sent to the wall. I mean, there's exceptions like John Connington and things like that, but that brings us to another point. Most exiled knights from Westeros join the Golden Company. They don't become a contemporary, someone on equal footing within this group, the Band of Nine, the Ninepenny Kings. So Ser Derrick Fossoway somehow is on relatively equal footing within the Band of Nine to Maelys and these other big deal bad guys in the Band of Nine. So I have no idea what he did, but something substantial, something criminal. Maybe he was a underworld figure. And the others are mentioned as sellsword captains and pirate captains. So he's not that, because why would they be famous sellswords and him just Ser Derrick Fossoway, who, he was a sellsword guy also. It just isn't mentioned. I don't believe that. So something else. But what? Something substantial to put him on equal footing with these other big players. Maybe he made off with some of his own family's wealth. Maybe he stole the big portion of Fossaway wealth and did criminal things with it. It doesn't just have to be one thing, too. He could have done a lot of different dastardly things that brought him to the attention of the other members of the band. Maybe he had a powerful mother. Maybe he was a Tyrell by birth on his mother's side, so that gave him extra clout and wealth, potentially, access to things. Now, let's look at the timeline. This guy, Ser Derrick Fossoway, was active in the Band of Nine. The Band of Nine invaded Westeros in 259, 260. That's when the Ninepenny Kings War began. That's only 51 years after Ashford, which isn't exactly a lot of space for like a lot of different generations to squeeze in there. We don't know whether he's red apple or brown or green apple. I would lean red because it's tempting to lean towards him having been influenced by Stefan, right? Like Stefan was a jerky guy who might have gotten jerkier as his reputation for such became well known. As his taste for glory attempt backfired horribly, it may have had an effect on his immediate family. If Stefan inherits, has a son, maybe it's this guy, or maybe he has several sons and this is one of them. Yeah, this Ser Derrick Fossoway could be a direct descendant, not just direct descendant, but son of Sir Stefan Fossoway. He could be a son of Raymun too, just a, good guy has a bad son. What can you do? But it's just tempting to lean Stefan because you could see a guy raised by Stefan turning out like this, right? Someone who takes after his father, and his father's a real piece of work, a real rotten apple. And this guy's a real rotten apple, right? It just really fits. Think of the examples Stefan set for his own children, assuming he had them. Trading his honor for a lordship, throwing his lot in with Aryan, of all people. And especially if the Targaryens are somewhat unpopular amongst some of the nobility of the Reach. We don't have to take the show's word for that. It's believable anyway. And then you got that. That's not a good look. None of this looks good for House Fossoway. It could be that this is where Ser Derrick came of age during this semi-tumultuous time within the family, and it had an effect on him. Or it just made him see opportunities. He saw dollar signs. He saw his own opportunity for a taste of glory. Even though bad apples don't taste very good, well, I'm sure he could figure out a workable metaphor there. Maybe he was the firstborn, got exiled and lost his inheritance for that reason, but he had done things with it before losing it. Maybe he got rich from Fossoway cider. Maybe he was made arrangements, did deals with other people farther away. Maybe he expanded the business and then started doing villainous things with it. Given the Band of Nine invaded Westeros not that long after Aegon V's death, maybe whatever villainous things he did, in fact, probably whatever villainous things he did to be on that footing with the band, was during Aegon's reign, during Aegon V's reign. So it may have been while Aegon had his long reign, there's this bad apples out there doing things of note. And Stefan is like, sorry, y'all, or that's my kid, that's my boy. Or Raymun's like, sorry, y'all, I tried to raise him better, but, what happens, The apple did fall far from the tree. We don't know if any Fossoways fought on the Stepstones against the band. Would have been a good way for them to show that their loyalty. So I would suspect yes more than I would be more likely to guess yes than no, especially because the Fossoways are so numerous too. Like, what are the odds that there's no Fossoways of age able to fight in that war? That seems unlikely. It would be interesting if one of them actually crossed swords with Ser Derrick. How do villains like that view the notion of being seen as a kinslayer? Do they care? Do they think it maybe makes them even more villainous? Is it something they want as rep? Either way, after the death of Maelys to Ser Barristan, the band just kind of gave up on Westeros. So you wonder what Ser Derrick would have gotten out of it. Like, maybe he would have been Maelys' hand or something like that. Because Cider Hall only seems like a kind of a small reward for given what the band's aims were. They aimed really high. Maelys wanted all of Westeros. He wanted the Iron Throne. So I don't think Ser Derrick, his ally who would have helped put Maelys on the throne would have wanted something so small. So yeah, maybe he handed the king like what Illyrio wants, or Master of Coin, or something big like that. Something like that he could really leverage, an office he could really leverage for future villainy, further gain, ill-gotten gains. It's also possible he's older than our guess, because I'm guessing he was born within 10 to 15 years after Ashford. It could have been sooner than that. I'm just guessing I just happen to guess. I prefer the guesses that have him near Maelys' age, and Maelys was probably in his early 20s when the band broke out. So, but it's possible Derrick Fossoway was like a 50-year-old man, a long criminal career, in which case that he would have been born like a year after Ashford, right? So that's entirely possible. There's a pretty wide range of opportunities here, or of options here, and it's a pretty compelling character, we heard about what the Fossoways thought about the Targaryens, right? The Fossoways would probably have some words about this guy, about their own bad apple. Like, this guy gives us a bad name. So it's another example of a fairly interesting character whose full story is yet to be written, even though he's historical. But not that far back. He may have survived for quite a while. For all we know, this guy survived the collapse of the Band of Nine and just maybe he went farther east like Miro of Bravos did when the Second Sons couldn't find work because of his reputation. Well, he went and found work in Slaver's Bay. There's always somebody willing to hire you when you go when there's worse people out there. So maybe Ser Derrick just went east towards Slaver's Bay and found a place where he was things were more to his liking, but quite possibly he was just killed during the collapse of the band when they stopped working together. Guilty Undertaker adds, if it's clear and yellow, you got juice there, fella. If it's tangy and brown, you're in Cider Town. Ned Flanders. That's right. Ned Flanders, very quotable, even when it comes to apples. Let's talk a little bit about real-world apples and symbolism and history here. It's pretty cool. They're a symbol, they're a trope in the story, in the real world, and there's some cool real-life fun facts about them, too. Now, I told you about our first appearance of a Fossoway, right? We always do first mentions, right? But the first actual apple, real apple, the fruit itself, is the first one we see. It's Littlefinger is eating an apple. Of course, it's the apple villain trope. He wasn't peeling it. That would be a little more on the nose, because the peeling an apple villain thing is just, that's the most ubiquitous apple symbolism on TVs and movies. But yeah, so Littlefinger's leading Ned towards the brothel, and Littlefinger's just like is moving quickly, and Ned is trying to catch up, and by the time Ned catches up, Littlefinger's just leaning on a wall eating an apple, and then he's like, you're so slow, and then he throws the apple core into the river there. So Christian, Greek, Norse, Celtic. Christian, y'all know that one most certainly. Adam and Eve, right? Greek, you probably know that one too. It's the apple of discord, the apple of Eris that led to the Trojan War, right? The apple said for the fairest, a golden apple that was rolled into the party where all the gods were at, and they argued over who the fairest was. Like, I'm the fairest. Aphrodite said, no. Athena said, no, it's me. Hera said, are you kidding? It's me. So they go to ask Paris. Paris, judge this contest for us. Paris should have immediately been like, I decline. But he didn't. And the Trojan War followed. In the Norse world, there's the apples of Idun. And this is probably the origin of the phrase, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. The apples of Idun was one of the goddesses, and her apples kept them immortal. If the gods and goddesses would eat the apples every day, and it would keep them young and vital, and they'd live forever. Funnily enough, while I was searching for lore on this, I discovered a painter who depicted Idun as young and beautiful. Of course, she's eating the apples. But her husband, the god of poetry and skalds and related things, Bragi, pictured as old. What is she not giving him the apples? That's not a very good wife. She's not sharing her youthful apples. She gives them to all the other Norse deities but her husband. Damn, Idun. It's rough. Avalon from Celtic King Arthur storydom, legendarium. It was the Isle of Apples. Druid wands could be made of yew or apple. Not you, as in you, the tree you, not you, the person. So as I alluded to earlier, apple seeds are not very reliable. They will grow apples, but they're very random. They're not like clones of the tree they come from. It's just huge varieties of apples come from the seeds of apples. So Johnny Appleseed, I made a joke that Johnny Appleseed was doing it wrong, but he wasn't really doing it wrong. There's a huge benefit to just throwing apple seeds everywhere. Now it's an establishing thing that you're doing here. You're spreading all these apple seeds everywhere. Some of those apple seeds are going to make trees that will actually work well in that place, because variety of climates, weather, humidity, all that other stuff, soil quality. Given the huge random outcome of apple seeds, some of them are going to actually work out really well. Some of them are going to produce crappy apples. Some of them won't even grow. Those are forgettable. But the few that work out really well, you take the root stocks and you use those to produce clones. So you can find, once you get the best apple, you can then start cloning them properly. But until you get the really good apple, you just keep planting seeds. But once you get the good apples, the one you want, you stop using seeds, because those are very random. But the randomness can be a benefit when you're getting started, see? So Johnny Appleseed didn't create great quantities of apples. He created great variety of apples, which locals from a variety of regions could then select the best ones and make them permanent. So he gets credit. But the story has a lot more nuance to it. And you think this isn't a legend. No, there really was a Johnny Appleseed. This is a real person.
John Chapman.
Yeah, John Chapman. He was a religious dude. So yeah, and he was certainly seems like one of those very good people that was just trying to spread food everywhere. Like, apples are great, right? So good job, Johnny Appleseed. Good job, John Chapman. Real person, did good work. But the story isn't quite what we're told. So in China, the Johnny Appleseed of China wasn't a single individual. It was the species of brown bears. Brown bears are uniquely well suited for spreading apples or apple trees. And it is part of what you think. Yeah, they eat the apples and then they poop the seeds out and the seeds grow. But it's better than that. The few animals can digest seeds, but something about bears' digestive systems sets the seeds up to germinate properly. Like, if you just drop there, they don't necessarily work, because apples require cross-pollination and all this other stuff that isn't worth explaining. The biology isn't quite straightforward. But the bottom line is, brown bears love apples, and they eat the crap out of them, and then they crap them out and spread them all over Asia. And that was probably where apples began. Apple trees began in Asia, maybe just like millions of years ago, possibly, until humans started working with them maybe 12,000 years ago. Like replanting them, making orchards, all that. In modern times, there's like 7,500 cultivars, which I think is basically the same thing as species, but, scientific terms vary when there's nuance as to what type of life form they're describing. So cultivars apparently is the right term. That's how many apples there are in the world, species of apples. It's crazy, right? And there's ones that are grown in winter. There's ones that are grown in high climates. It's a very, very diverse, adaptable fruit, which is why it is so ubiquitous in symbolism, because it's the part of so many cultures formed, grew over, as a part or alongside or because of certain crops that enabled them to get going. Without this certain foodstuffs, they would never have been able to become a whole civilization or a city or a town or whatever. And apples are a part of so many of these stories because they are so big and widespread in so many places around the world. Some really funny anecdotes that have added to the spread of apples. And as I said, it's probably about 10,000 BC that humans started spreading apples around. They got to Egypt around 1800 BC. They never were huge in Egypt, but because Egypt obviously is much older than that, but apple trees in Egypt even. Alexander the Great sent some apple specimens back from Persia to Aristotle. Just here, Aristotle, take these apples and plant them at your Lyceum. Julius Caesar, 400-ish years later, 270-ish years later, wrote the first recorded reference to apples. He observed native Celts fermenting crab apples. Yeah, you can make cider out of bad apples. Like the apples you wouldn't want to eat can still make cider out of, or jelly or compote or whatever. By the time Caesar's army was headed back to Rome, his men were making and drinking that cider. They were like, that's a good idea. That's a tradition. That's a technique we're going to immediately bring back to Rome with us. Of course, Caesar also brought the end of the Republic back with him. But hey, at least they had some nice beverage to celebrate the giant political transition that occurred around that time. The term cider originated around the 9th century AD. English monks and Irish monks were big in propagating it, experimenting with it, coming up with different ways to make it, trying out different apples, trying out different brewing techniques. And it may have had a precursor in Greek Roman times called Sicera, which you can kind of hear. You can kind of hear the word cider in that. Like you could sort of see the origin there. Per capita, the UK drinks the most cider. No one's surprised about that. And it has the biggest cider producing companies too. But it's also very big in the US. And as I said, Ireland and the UK linked in that regard. The UK Commonwealth nations like Australia and other places drink quite a lot of cider too. There's so many ways to make it now. Not all these things are old school, but nowadays, other fruits, tannins, sugar, honey, hops, cinnamon, ginger, rose petals, hibiscus, aging it, not aging it. Now, modern times, carbonation, not carbonation. Winters come, frozen apples are a thing to make cider. You actually have apples that are intentionally frozen and then pressed to make cider. That's the thing. Yeah. Cold brew coffee, cold brew cider. Yeah. And a lot of the similar techniques used to make wine were tried on cider and vice versa. Certain ingredients that were put in wine were also put in ciders. Hey, that worked in wine. Why not try it in cider? And vice versa. This worked in cider. How does it taste in wine? So a lot of overlap there. What's crazy about this is there's techniques that people are still using that were developed in ancient times, yet they're also still making new techniques. It's really neat. The combination of really long-held tradition, things that just, it ain't broke, don't fix it, to a combination of, hey, there's so many new things we could try, and some of these are going to work out really well. Earlier, we had the example of the fearsomely strong cider in the Quill and Tankard at Old Town. A couple other examples. Brienne has cider at the end of the Kneeling Man, but when Arya gets to the end of the Kneeling Man, they're out. All the cider is gone. Too bad. Brienne and Podrick also have cider at the Quiet Isle. And that's where they call it far famed. They have really good cider there, apparently, so good for them. They have cider at Castle Black. Usually they warm it up to chill the bones away. Well, not usually, but often it's hot cider. They even have cider beyond the wall. There's apple trees beyond the wall. Goes to show, apples grow in such a wide variety of places. That's a great example of it. That's not unrealistic at all. It's actually Varamir who mentions it. It's one of the things he would get tribute. He had all these villages that gave him food and women and cider periodically, or food and fodder and cider, and he would just take the women whenever. But either way, they were giving him cider. Bringing all this back around to House Fossoway, it's not hard to see how the Green Apple Fossoways could have overtaken the Reds in wealth, given all these varieties and this innovation stuff we talked about. Maybe the Greens just had some real talent in innovation, and or not. Maybe I'm just making all this up. It's just an idea. But the point is, brewing better cider gets you better customers, more customers, and it's different than the usual ways that noble houses overtake each other in prestige and prominence. It usually has to do with violence or politics or both. This is mercantile operations, which is, as we've said a few times here, is usually not how these noble houses compete with each other. Maybe Raymun even had the talent. Maybe Raymun himself is the one that was just good at it, because he was not a highborn. Well, he's highborn. He wasn't high up in the rankings of the Fossoways, so you got to think that's what a lot of lower ranking Fossoways do, is they take jobs in the family business, right? Like, so maybe Raymun actually had a lot of boots on the ground type skills that someone like Stefan, as the heir to the house, would not have ever learned, because that would be a job for subordinates beneath him, but it wouldn't necessarily be beneath Raymun. These are also advantages to starting fresh with a new house. Cider Hall has its thing. It's been doing its thing for so long. Starting a new house, not only do you have an opportunity to come up with some fresh ideas, but you don't have these entrenched business arrangements that are really, really old. And old in a sense that is kind of unfathomable to us on Earth, because we don't have nations this old, or even close to it, that are, still relatively similar to how they started. What I mean by that is, the Cider Hall Fossoways, they've been dealing with the same families, same merchants, same organizations for so long, and that's when corruption and old boy network stuff starts to set in. A fresh start with a fresh house and making new business deals, new arrangements with new people and positions they aren't entrenched. They haven't gotten used to. They haven't gotten fat, lazy, and corrupt, or whatever euphemisms you want to apply to it. I'm speaking metaphorically, of course. With a new start, you may have less corruption. That's the shorter version of this. So that's another reason why the Green Apple Fossoways could have gotten ahead, because they're not all deeply into this, into an industry that's grown corrupt. A few bad apples can ruin the batch, after all. That's another Apple phrase that gets used improperly. People say a few bad apples ruin the batch, but it's the opposite. It's supposed to be a few bad apples don't ruin the batch. It's like, why would they? A couple of them are mushy. The rest of them are fine. That skin on the outside of an apple is pretty thick. It's not going to get diseased or ruined by a couple apples dripping some juice on them, right? So it's kind of funny. That's backwards too. Some of these Apple phrases are all messed up. All right, our final section is the apples of A Song of Ice and Fire. Having a double branch allows them to represent the entangled nature of noble marriages, right? That's already such a thing in the noble houses of Westeros. They've all married into each other so many times. It's even harder to parse here with the Fossoways, which is part of the point. And I think that's part of why George has them still so tied together, because it really speaks to that. Now, here's a famous example that most of us didn't catch, meaning that it included a Fossoway. I know you caught the main thrust of this point, which is that when Melisandre shadow baby assassinates Sir Courtney Penrose with Davos's help at Storm's End, it's done in part because Stannis knows who is going to take Sir Courtney Penrose's place. He knows that replacement will yield the castle, as he says here. Quote,
Ser Courtney's lieutenant is cousin to the Fossoways. Lord Meadows, a green boy of 20. Should some ill chance strike down Penrose, command of Storm's End would pass to this stripling, and his cousins believe he would accept my terms and yield up the castle.
Stannis wasn't truly sold on Melisandre till he could see what she could do. He saw, okay, well, that's real sorcery. Now, we all know Melisandre picked up on that and exaggerated her abilities, which is probably something she was doing long before Stannis anyway, but she certainly saw him as a target for that sort of manipulation. And you wonder how a lot of these other lords under Stannis perceive Melisandre in that regard. Like, they're all very suspicious of Sir Courtney's death too, I'm sure. It wasn't just people like Tyrion or Varys or whether who's like, that doesn't make sense. That dude was staunch. He was yelling at them and threatening to fight them, willing to duel them, and then he just jumps. Doesn't make sense, does it? So that reflects on Melisandre. So I kind of wonder what are the Fossoways and these other houses that were behind? What do they think of Melisandre? Now, their trajectory, not the most noble, as Sir Courtney called them out for before his murder. He's like, you guys fought first Renly and now for Stannis, and you change cloaks as often as I change my boots or whatever. And then they lost on the Blackwater and bent the knee to Joffrey. So now he's dead. So now all these lords and knights focused on the Fossoways. So the Fossoways are now bent the knee to Tommen. So Renly, then Stannis, then Joffrey, now Tommen. Yeah, that's counting Robert. That's 5 kings, as many as the war of the same name. Now, they have had the same liege lord throughout all that. 5 different kings, but Mace Tyrell's been the liege lord for all of it. Although I wouldn't necessarily bet on Mace holding it for the rest of the story. I think maybe he's going to exit stage left. On the other side of that coin, this is a very difficult character moment that's devoid of politics or the supernatural. It does take place at a very political wedding. It's the Purple Wedding. But this moment is very human. It's about Tyrion, and it's about what he can never be. Quote.
And there was one woman sitting almost at the foot of the 3rd table on the left, the wife of one of the Fossoways, he thought, and heavy with his child. Her delicate beauty was in no way diminished by her belly, nor was her pleasure in the food and frolics. Tyrion watched as her husband fed her morsels off his plate. They drank from the same cup and would kiss often and unpredictably. Whenever they did, his hand would gently rest upon her stomach, a tender and protective gesture. He wondered what Sansa would do if he leaned over and kissed her right now. Flinch away, most likely, or be brave and suffer through it, as was her duty. She is nothing if not dutiful. This wife of mine.
So this is a love he yearns for and believes he's undeserving of or even capable of. Now remember, this is not that long before Jaime reveals the truth of Tysha, so he's currently still thinking the Tysha thing was a ruse. So he has, in his experience, his perception of his experience is that he's never experienced true love. Actually, he had. He just was lied to it. His family lied to him about it. So there's a lot of cynicism here in this moment as well, but it still really hits hard, I think. The Purple Wedding is a really powerful scene for a lot of reasons. This maybe is a moment that gets overlooked a little bit, given there's so much going on. I've pointed out during Valor Aretas that it's also one of the longest chapters in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. So it's a big part of who Tyrion is and part of what's moving him towards the thing he does, killing his own father here, because of treatment like this, because of who he is and because of how his own family has made this worse for him rather than made it better for him, rather than uplift him and, speak to his abilities rather than point out his flaws. Especially Tywin does this a lot. Jaime too was pretty good about this, but of course was forced into this lie by his father as well. And it's just not a place that Tyrion feels like he belongs. A world he doesn't think he belongs in. Love is just not a thing for him. It's pretty damn sad. Even these thoughts on Tyrion aside, I mean, I don't think anyone deserves that. But there's some parallels here too, right? Raymun and Rowan in the show, it's not just because that Dunk is uncomfortable about the implication of Rowan potentially misleading Raymun about a baby. It's just Dunk is uncomfortable with that whole thing. It's not the baby thing only. That didn't help. Dunk is uncomfortable with the idea of relationships. He has no idea what a relationship would be. Look how he was with Tanzel. He had no idea what to do. He had that endearing, but notably naive and shy approach. He just didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to talk to her. He's like, I got nothing. He just has no idea what he's doing. So the whole thing makes him uncomfortable. He sees these two, Raymun and Rowan, just ease into it so naturally. Like love came to them so naturally, perfectly. Just it happened and they went with it. Like Dunk is like, am I ever going to have that? I don't know. His life is going to be on the road. Sir Arlen never had a love. Sir Arlen didn't have a wife. He doesn't see that for him. So the idea makes him uncomfortable because it's not his future. So it's different from Tyrion because, he's not like ugly. In fact, he's quite handsome. So the reasons are different, but it's still a world he doesn't feel a part of. And I think that's neat. It's a parallel moment, and there's Fossoways involved in both. And the Fossoways are unusually well suited for this as an example of an idyllic lifestyle because of what we've been saying about how their castles positioning, their income, they're unusually well set up to avoid some of the worst things that happen in Westeros. If I didn't make the point before, I think I did, but I'll repeat it if I didn't. If you're a peasant born in Westeros, being born at Cider Hall or in New Barrel, probably one of the best places to be, right? Like, not that likely to have war, food's plenty, weather's great. Your lords aren't particularly known for going to war. They're known for kind of going along with it, but they're not the ones who start it. So, at least not as far as we know. So it seems like, there's a lot going on there. A lot. The Fossoways are an example of things that we might not have clocked before. They're maybe a perfect example of the most idyllic people to be. And that's what makes it so perfect for that Tyrion scene. And even Tyrion doesn't necessarily realize just how privileged that couple is and just how that moment is fueled by their upbringing and just how they have experienced so little setbacks, so little diversity or adversity in their lives that they just don't have cares. They don't have stress. Like, they're just like, everything is cool. And everything the rest of their lives is rosy. The outlook is great, right? Lady Leonette, good example here too. Leonette Fossoway. She's wife of Sir Garland the Gallant Tyrell, one of the most likable Tyrells, maybe the most likable Tyrell in terms of, not the most entertaining. That's probably Olenna, but just in terms of this guy is actually pretty upstanding, seemingly. Now, he was also at the Purple Wedding, of course. Tyrion speaks a lot with Lady Leonette Fossoway and Garland Tyrell. He's sitting next to them. So that scene where he observes another Fossoway and the tender, protective, all the love and romance and all that, he's sitting next to another Fossoway when that's happening. And Leonette Fossoway seems pretty cool too. She laughs at his jokes. She makes some jokes with him. She's like, man, that was a good line. You're a better singer than this guy. And Garland's like, no, my lady, he was made to do great deeds. And Tyrion is like honestly off-put in a good way by how nice they're being and how praising. He's not used to it. People are usually a dick to him, right? And not just Garland, but Lady Leonette is being really nice to him. It makes you wonder if there's an ulterior motive. And the ulterior motive is lulling him into a false sense of security, like making him not pay attention so they can pull off this poisoning and blame him on it. However, I still don't really think Garland was in on it. I don't see why they would need to have him in on it. Olenna doesn't need his participation. Why include more people in the conspiracy if you don't need to? I think Marjorie probably needed to know because she needed to avoid drinking from that cup. But Garland wasn't going to drink out of it. Leonette wasn't going to drink out of it. They weren't going to be the ones to place the poison in the cup. They didn't need to know. Don't add people to a conspiracy if you don't need to know them. Lady Olenna is probably smart enough to know that. Why would she need to tell? Maybe she'll tell later, but she didn't need to tell then. I mean, if Garland the Gallant is really such a noble, upstanding dude, she's not going to tell him that. Just let him believe the best about their family. She can do the dirty, underhanded work and keep it to herself, right? So it may have been well known, but the alternative view here is that they did know. They were very much in on it. Absolutely possible. They didn't have to know thing. You can only take that so far. That's not hard proof. It's just a solid thought, logical, I think. Nina suggests that very possibly this was exactly the plan, keeping Tyrion occupied, complimenting him would be one of the best ways to throw him off his game because he's just so unused to that. And it would actually work on him. He's starving for compliment. It did. He was very happy. He was oddly pleased by their compliments. And yeah, they knew the right things to say. So maybe that was arranged. Anyway, she first arrived at court with Marjorie. So well before the Purple Wedding, she came into Clash of Kings, and Sansa took note of her. And then she was cool to Sansa. And this is part of why we might be a little extra suspicion, was that she tried to comfort Sansa, knowing when she was about to marry Tyrion. She's like, yeah, sorry about that, sis, you got to marry that guy. I know that's not great, but make the most of it. And she taught Sansa the high harp. A little tidbit there. Sansa and Lady Leonette working on the high harp together. Very lovely instrument. Now, remember, Garland Tyrell was given Brightwater Keep, the castle of Florence, that's a big one. But of course, there's still Florence there. So you can't just walk in and take it. So he was besieging it with a Tyrell army, but that was interrupted, right? Because the Ironborn took the Shield Island. So Garland's like, all right, pause this, keep the siege intact, but a smaller amount of men, and then go off and try to deal with the Ironborn. So Lady Leonette may actually never be the Lady of Brightwater Keep in reality. She may have the title, but and not because Garland's claim is going to be lost necessarily, but because he might be. He might die. And he is a great fighter, and we haven't seen him actually fight yet, but I'm not sure that's in the cards for us, like what POV would we see him through? No one's at Brightwater Keep that's got a POV. Nor does anyone at the Shield Islands have a POV. So I feel like whatever happens with Garland, we'll hear about off page, and we'll be able to kind of deduce what happens with Lady Leonette through that. I kind of hope they have a nice ending. Lady Leonette seems okay, unless she was really in on this whole poisoning thing. Is it possible Garland was in on it and not her? That seems unlikely, because you can't really trust you wouldn't really be able to trust a lot of husbands and not tell their wives, right? So just either include both or neither. Green Sir John Fossoway. He's the first mentioned Fossoway in A Song of Ice and Fire. He's probably the Knight of New Barrel, aka the Green. He's married to Janna Tyrell. That's Mace's sister. So another just deep connection here. Everybody's entwined. Good marriage for him. Probably a good marriage for her too, given what we've been saying about the incomes and solid living situation that the Fossoways seem to have. And not every lady gets to marry the Lord, or in this case, the knightly title holder. So most, even Tyrells and highborn ladies like that, don't get to marry into someone who owns the castle. So for both of them, good marriage. And it's pretty typical. Other than that, though, Tyrell's liege lord marrying one of the more important vassals. Obviously, there's tons of Starks that have married with Manderleys and Bolton. Well, not Boltons. That's a notable exception. But pretty much every other northern house. Umbers, especially, Dustins, all that. Looking to the other regions, you see some of the same. Now, it's also possible that Highgarden wanted to rebuild the bridges between the Fossoways. Maybe the Fossoways had problems after the split. Maybe after Stefan and Raymun, there was a period of unease, if not worse, between the two houses. And Highgarden, as their liege lords, would seek to end that disputing, would maybe try to bring them back together. And you can't bring them back together through marriage. That's it's too incestuous. But you could do it this way. Both of them marry Tyrells. A green apple Fossoway marries a Tyrell, so does a red apple Fossoway. Or some other close connection like that. You have them hang out a bit, make sure you talk to them firmly about everybody getting along and all that stuff, and eventually maybe it works out. John Fossoway begged Renly for the honor of commanding the vanguard against Stannis, so not actually that brave of a thing to ask, because this was like a massive disparity in soldiers. Guyard the Green said, beg all you want, it belongs to blah, 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 blah. Guyard the Green versus John Green Fossoway? Yeah, this is green versus green there. Let's move on to a little bit about what we know about the current Reds, the Red Apple Fossoways. It starts off with another example of humor. Here is a quote.
Ser Tanton of the Red Apple Fossoways climbed on the table and swore to slay Sandor Clegane in single combat. The vow might have been taken more solemnly if Ser Tanton had not had 1 foot in a gravy boat when he made it.
I don't think the vow would have been taken more solemnly in any case, but it would have been less funny. So that's it. It's just funny. What's up with this guy? Wants to challenge Sir Sandor Clegane. Definitely drunk, clearly. I mean, this guy was drunk as heck, Sir Tanton. We don't know what this guy's role in the house is. He's not the Red Apple Fossoway Knight. That's probably Sir Brian. But, well, that requires some updating, because we have Sir Brian and Sir Edward, who were mentioned as Reds. These two guys were around. They also were with Renly, then Stannis, and then they fought at the Battle of the Blackwater together As we've been saying, the Fossoways were fighting together, not against each other. But fighting together wasn't enough, as we'll see in a second here. Now, Ser Tanton, he survived the battle. Gravy boat and all. He's now a sworn sword to Mace Tyrell. More on him in a minute. But Sir Brian and Sir Edward, it didn't go quite so well. Someone seems to have picked the Fossoways as an enemy. Someone who shakes them to their core. Lothor, Apple Eater. In the aftermath of the Battle of the Blackwater, we hear of the deeds of certain notables, and this is one of those notables. Quote,
"The free rider, Lothor Brune, who'd cut his way through 100 Fossoway men-at-arms to capture Ser John of the Green Apple and kill Ser Brian and Ser Edward of the Red, thereby winning himself the name Lothor Apple Eater."
The biggest killer of apples since worms, I think. We just had an episode called Three Baratheon Bastards 2 weeks ago, and this guy appeared because he's very much into Mia Stone. Not so much into apples, apparently, though. He certainly hasn't tried to shoot any fruit off of any of Mia's body parts. Maybe a Fossoway should come after him instead of after Sandor Clegane. Tanton should be like, no, Lothor Apple Eater is the big enemy of this house now. Forget about Sandor. I don't think Tanton could beat either of them, gravy boat guy. But maybe Tanton is a little more formidable when he's not drunk. Sworn sword to Mace Tyrell, he's got to be at least a little competent, although maybe not given who his employer is. But isn't that interesting, right? The concept of a guy who's one of the many houses in the Reach, and we know that the Reach might be split soon by the so-called Friends in the Reach, right? We might have a division of Reach Lords who decide to stick with Mace Tyrell versus those who sign on with Young Griff, a.k.a. Aegon the Sixth, a.k.a., along with John Connington and all that. So where is that going to go? Is there going to be, some of these Fossoways might turn and go with the Blackfires or the Aegon the Sixth, whatever you want to call them, or are they going to stay loyal? And maybe it's a little of both, because there's multiple Fossoways and multiple branches. But the idea that Mace Tyrell has a sworn sword that amongst one of the other houses of the Reach, which of course he'd have lots of those. It's just a reminder that when the Friends of the Reach do their thing, some of them might be literally standing right behind Mace Tyrell. Like literally one of them could just draw a dagger and stab him. You're like, haha, gotcha. That's not the most knightly thing to do, but I don't think that's going to be so much of an argument to say it won't happen, is it? So now I'm not saying it's Ser Tanton, because the Fossoways probably aren't amongst the Friends in the Reach. And this final character is where the clue for that comes from. The Brown Apple. Sir Franklin Flowers is a captain in the Golden Company, one familiar and relatively friendly to John Connington. He also already knew Halden Halfmaester. When we first introduced to Franklin Flowers, he knows these people already. They've already been acquainted. He'd been in the Golden Company for a while. Obviously, so did John Connington, so they were friends. Now, at this point, he's a captain. He was more of a regular exile knight. Followed a somewhat standard pattern to join the Golden Company. He's not necessarily descendant of an exile. The Fossoways aren't exiles here. At least not other than Ser Derrick Fossoway. Now, the bad apple, that is. We have the bad apple and the brown apple contrast here. So Franklin's mother was a washerwoman at Cider Hall. His father was a Fossoway who forced himself on that woman. He says this makes him a brown apple Fossoway. Very much in line with Westerosi sigil humor, wordplay and all that. Here he is in a very important scene in A Dance with Dragons. Quote,
"If my aunt wants Marine, she's welcome to it. I will claim the Iron Throne by myself, with your swords and your allegiance. Move fast and strike hard, and we can win some easy victories before the Lannisters even know that we have landed. That will bring others to our cause." Rivers was smiling in approval. Others traded thoughtful looks. Then Peake said,
"I would sooner die in Westeros than on the Demon Road."
and Mark Mandrake chuckled and responded, Me, I'd sooner live, win lands, and some great castle. And Franklin Flowers slapped his sword hilt and said,
So long as I can kill some Fossoways, I'm for it. Now, given that last comment, it kind of does imply that the Fossoways aren't their friends. Like this guy Laswell Peak, he's the one who says we have friends in the Reach, and that's like the source of a lot of the conspiracy, which, of course, there's more clues for it than that. Randall Tarley's acting kind of sketchy, for example, so he's a major candidate for being one of those friends in the Reach. So the fact that the Fossoways are a target of Franklin Flowers, a captain who's in the know, sort of implies the Fossoways are not on that side. They are going to stay loyal. Now, maybe something unexpected will happen and they'll join up and they'll be like, hey, because, I mean, that will bring others to our cause, Aegon says here. If they perform well, others will join them. Maybe Franklin, it won't go Franklin's way, and the Fossoways will join and be like, hey, they're all on our side. How can I kill Fossoways when they're all our allies? But honestly, you know who we would love to meet and praise and buy a cup of cider for? It would be Lothor Apple. You're like, that dude, well played, man. You killed how many Fossoways? Dude, I'm so jealous. You captured one also? I don't know if I'd been able to do that. I might have had to kill him, you know? So Franklin is also like, the Fossoways are emblematic of a lot of things we've shown in this episode. They're a house that's a bit idyllic. They're a house that's really rich, a house that represents the entanglement of noble houses. We also have this side of things. A good example, the hatred that the exiles have for their distant cousins, especially his circumstances. His circumstances are more extreme. He isn't just someone that got exiled while the rest of his family got stayed behind. He was brought into this world by violent sexual assault and hates the man that did it. He hates his father. He hates the family that did that to his mother. Of course, he's taken his mother's side, which I think all of us would too. I mean, that's easy. This isn't conflict. This isn't one of those like, gee, what side am I on this one? You know, like, no, we're on the side of the victim, not the rapist. It's pretty straightforward. It's about as straightforward as it gets. So Franklin Flowers, you get why he's that way. The other Fossoways aren't guilty by association. You don't have to condone that, but you get it, right? He hasn't named his father. We would love to know which Fossoway it was so we could direct our ire at him too. But I think for now it's maybe George hasn't decided, or it isn't important, or maybe it is important. It would be really something if it was a named character or a direct descendant of a named character that we're familiar with. So, Tanton Fossoway, again, that comes back to him. What if whoever those friends are going to go after, the friends are going to turn on Mace Tyrell? Well, they got to get through Ser Tanton. Ser Tanton, he should change his personal sigil. We're on the subject of personal sigils. He should change it to an apple in a gravy boat, yelling at a dog. Tanton's perhaps the only Fossoway that, besides maybe Sir John, who is a candidate to be killed, because we don't know the other names. Like Franklin might want to kill Ser Tanton. Maybe he'll do that. And after he does that, well, his appetite won't be satisfied. You know, one apple, that's not enough. Who's full off of one apple? Especially not a soldier. You know, a guy who traveled all the way from Essos to kill Fossoways. One's not going to be enough. So there's a lot there. There's a lot going on with the Fossoways, a lot they're attached to. Their branches are everywhere, appropriate for a house represented by apples, appropriate for the house that has, for a fruit that has such random, diverse outcomes amongst its own existence, one that's so successful and prominent and widespread. George loves these kind of themes, and this is such a great example of it. It's so very fleshed out, like the flesh of an apple. It's so very fibrous and regular. So outlook, between Derrick, who's maybe not the most popular character, but definitely one we're really curious about, Raymun, who is a very popular character and one we're very curious about, and Stefan, there's a lot of stories potential for us to still have that we haven't gotten yet. What's unusual about that is when we point this out, it's usually something to come maybe in Fire and Blood 2 or Song of Ice and Fire. In this case, yes, Fire and Blood 2, and probably Song of Ice and Fire as well, but it's mostly Dunk and Egg where we have to look forward to this. So it's different than our usual expectation. And we are, at least at this point, most of us, more optimistic about the TV show. So, because of George's involvement in it, which means there could be an expansion or some two-way streets. George might say, hey, I don't necessarily want to run with this whole Lady Rowan, the sex worker origin for Raymun's first Green Apple Fossoway way, or for the founder, the matriarch of Green Apple Fossoways. But he might be like, but he might do that. Or he might just go halfway and be like, yeah, the first lady of Green Apple Fossoways was named Rowan, and just leave it at that. You know, it's a connecting point, and the rest of us can we can fill the gaps in where we want. That's what happens when George is pleased with what he sees on TV. He'll actually like give them a little leeway and make it a two-way street, even though it's mostly one way. They're still mostly taken from him, but he may occasionally take a few things from them and be like, hey, that was a good idea. And the better the show is, the better the quality, the more he likes it, the more likely that is to happen. So I think it's not unlikely that the Raymun of the book starts to look a little bit and act a little bit more like Sean Thomas, perhaps, which I'm all for that. Either way, there's stuff to look forward to. Now, a couple more comments from you all, I guess. The saying absolutely is a few bad apples can ruin the whole bunch. A rotten apple releases a chemical which makes other nearby apples ripen and rotten faster. Rotting fruit releases ethylene gas, which accelerates the ripening and decay of nearby fruits. Okay, so yeah, you're right. That is a thing that can happen. However, it's not always true. Here's some additional explanation. Looks like Ashea did some on-the-fly research to help out here. The bad apples metaphor originates from the proverb, a rotten apple quickly infects its neighbor. First recorded as used in English in 1340. Linguists such as Ben Zimmer have pointed out that the proverb began to be used in the opposite sense in the 20th century, instead stating that a few bad apples are not representative of the group. Okay, so it's kind of had different iterations and back and forth, like the apple pendulum has swung both ways on how this has been used. Interesting. According to Zimmer, this usage may have corresponded to how grocery stores changed the display usage of apples. Modern shops would sold apples individually and, of course, just wouldn't display the bad ones. That's just common sense. Yeah, just don't put your bad apples on display. Zimmer also suggests the change in usage may have been solidified by the band The Osmonds. In 1971, they had a song called One Bad Apple, which includes the line, "One bad apple don't spoil the whole bunch, girl." Yeah, songs can really spread lines like that, can't they? So I guess it's a kind of I was partly wrong, partly right. There's just more to the story, and that is a lot of it right there. Ranabir Mitra, hey Ranabir, how you doing? He says, could Franklin Flowers defect to Dany's cause if Fagon chooses to be peaceful towards House Fossoway? We did, meaning me and Stephen Atwell, contemplate this idea a few years ago, and Ranabir points that out. Yeah, I mean, the Golden Company they're not like married to each other. These are all exiles that are united by a common goal. If that goal starts to fracture, and if that goal is no longer in sight for a lot of people who signed up with that goal in mind, if that is taken away from them, then yeah, they would absolutely switch sides. None of them are married to the Golden Company in that sense. I think very few of them have that level of loyalty to it. They all want what the Golden Company can do for them. Maybe they want it as a fallback. Like if nothing works, they want to be able to stay employed. But yeah, I think most of them are willing to put it all on the line to get lordships. And absolutely, Franklin could defect to Dany for that reason. If she's his best chance, if he's like, maybe just because he doesn't want to be on the losing side. I mean, a lot of Golden Company folk might defect because dragons. They don't want to fight that, you know? So it might be not quite so straightforward as this helps me accomplish my goals. It might be, I don't want to die, but also I can't accomplish my goals if I'm dead. So there's both of that. Good catch, Ranabir. I don't remember everything I said with Stephen Atwell when we talked about Ser Derrick back when we did that episode. So folks, you should check that out again too. It's one of my recommendations. Check out our episodes on the Nine Penny Kings. We did 2 of them. And the bad apple comes up there as well. Our trivia question. Who mentioned an apple while on their deathbed? Robert Baratheon, y'all. I think a few people probably got that right, or no? Did anyone get that?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes, someone did. Kulnitsky did first, I believe.
Cool, good job, Kulnitsky, and anyone else who got it. Of course, the scene is Robert telling Ned to roast the boar that killed him and to put an apple in its mouth. Yep. It wasn't to do with the Fossoway. Don't put a Fossoway in that boar's mouth. In addition to the Nine Penny Kings episodes, our Fire and Blood coverage has some relates to some of the anecdotes we discussed here, the Fossoways that were relevant during the times of the earlier Targaryen kings. Valar Reretus, of course, has a lot of these, has a lot of analysis of different little tidbits here, including Lothor, Apple Eater, Sansa, Leonette Fossoway, other things here and there. Also, our Night of the Seven Kingdoms coverage. I assume most of you already caught that, but if not, we certainly talked about the Fossoways a good bit there. And the Hedge Knight itself. We did 4 episodes on the Hedge Knight, and then 4 episodes each on the Sworn Sword and the Mystery Knight. Or maybe it was 5 for some of them, because we did wrap-ups. But either way, lots of coverage of the Dunk and Egg series, and there's more Fossoways in there as well. Thanks to Nina for a lot of great takes today. As usual, don't forget to check out Good Queen Alley with 1L.tumblr.com. And thanks to Joey and Jesse for our intro music, and Michael Klarfeld for the video. Shout out to Brand the Builder as well, who has done so much work for us in that regard. In terms of videos and intros, we always want to make sure he gets credit. On behalf of Shea, I'm Aziz. Happy Easter, everybody. This is the day we're recording it. Whether you celebrate it or not, we wish you good things. And we'll see you next time for more Valar Reread Us, folks.